everybody. Thank you for being at today's meeting. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, but first I just want to say Happy New Year to everybody, and I hope you all had a wonderful holiday. And yeah, now we're back to work. So we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Could you, Councilmember Branch, lead us?
Of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next we have the consent agenda. 2 items have been pulled. Councilmember Jones, Black, and Patton have pulled B2. Councilmember Jones has pulled B3. Could I have a motion to approve the remainder?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, that was unanimous, clerk. Okay, so for B2, let's see, Councilmember Black is not here. Councilmember Jones and Patton, if you will just address why you pulled it.
Sure. Yeah, I just was surprised to see this move through the consent process. Was sort of expecting to see it in a roll call vote section of the agenda. So I mostly wanted to pull it just procedurally. Also, if you're able to share with us, City Attorney, like what might trigger something to go in the consent agenda versus be pulled into the main part. And then additionally, this struck me as something that might warrant a public hearing. It just seemed like the type of action that would warrant a public hearing, but we don't think we've had one. And so just if you could illuminate me what like triggers something to get a public hearing. Those are my questions.
Well, I guess in this case, this previously came before the council in December, and there was unanimous support to bring it back for this agenda. Because of that, we put it on the consent agenda, but certainly if the council would like for it to go somewhere else, could do that. There were, as I recall, at least 2 opportunities for public engagement. This process started obviously before I got here with Deputy City Attorney Dottie Keebler working on it. And as I understand it, there were 2 public engagement sessions to get feedback. And in fact, as a result of that feedback, several changes were made to the ordinance that was actually presented to the council. So there is not a statutory requirement for a public hearing, but if that is the interest of the council, we will act accordingly.
Got it. Thanks. Yeah, I know we did the public engagement and that lots of revisions were made as a result of that, which is great. Like we love when public engagement works the way it's supposed to. In many other actions that we take, we sort of wrap it up with a bow. We do lots of public engagement and then still have the public hearing. So I think that's what I was anticipating and trying, like thinking we would mirror. But I don't know if my colleagues are feeling like the public hearing is important to them. I will pass it over to Councilmember Jones for her questions.
Oh, Councilmember Melton had his hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to add, it was my understanding that we voted in December, but because there are potential criminal penalties, the state statute requires a second vote. So it went on consent as a formality for the second vote. Is that right?
That is correct.
Right. So,
it does require a second reading.
Right. And so when I saw it on consent, that's what I thought was because we voted already to approve it, but we have to do a second one. Okay. So unless anybody changed their mind from December, I think that's why it was on consent. I personally don't think it should go to public hearing. We've been talking about this for a very, very long time. I know most of the residents and the business owners are ready for us to do something. So I thought we did something in December, and I'm ready to do it again today.
Perhaps I just misunderstood. My apologies.
Okay.
I have 2 just clarifying questions. When it goes into the arbitration, so if there's an appeal and it says that there would be a charge for that, who pays that arbiter? Is it the resident who's being charged, or would it be the city?
Councilmember Jones, Dottie Kibler from the City Attorney's Office. It is the city. That obligation has been in place since 2009.
And my recollection is, at the time, we believed there was not statutory authority to allow the city to charge that fee elsewhere.
So they would be paying whether or not it goes through or fails. The city would pay that arbiter to manage that.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And the second question that I had has to do with, we received an email from a resident living outside near Ironworks. In there, they sent a video of how loud it is, and they wanted to know like how that pertains to the potential noise ordinance. It was really, really loud. I actually contacted Ironworks, and they said that though it is that loud, but it's a requirement of the city because there is an underground parking garage for ventilation, that it is required, and that's why Ironworks does it, because the city asked them to. And in my communication with the resident who asked, I said that I would uplift it today. Would that be part of this noise ordinance? Would they, or is it kind of like grandfathered out, even if it's loud?
So all noises are going to be controlled by the noise ordinance that's in effect. And I'm not familiar with the video. We could certainly meet with the police department and review the concerns.
Okay. All right, thank you so much.
Okay, any other, Councilmember Black?
I was concerned about, everybody knows I'm a part of the activist community here in Raleigh, and a lot of the questions that I got were specifically about the impact to demonstrations that happen downtown and like perceived noise and like the impact to First Amendment rights and being able to do demonstrations. I have some direct experience with like taking a megaphone outside of Wells Fargo to boycott their investments into the climate crisis. And I was called, the police were called on me. And technically it wasn't illegal because I was on the sidewalk. But if I were to do something like that again, or somebody else were to do something like that again, what could potentially be the impact to demonstrations and people who are like using their First Amendment right? Because that was the concern for me with this noise ordinance.
So I'll start with the section of the code that's devoted to First Amendment and acknowledging First Amendment rights. That's 12-5002, that says that this chapter, the entire chapter, is to be interpreted as a content-neutral ordinance that recognizes and protects the freedom of expression. So that's now specifically in the code. There are provisions, and I'm thinking particularly of 5007, that deal with someone with a megaphone that is in close proximity to individuals. And there is now a provision that an unwilling recipient of that loud level of noise, I believe it's within 50 feet, let's see, it's subsection P. So there is a limit during nighttime hours at a distance of 50 feet from a reasonable person, during daytime hours at a distance of 300 feet from a reasonable person, meaning that the sound level, you're expected during the daytime hours to have a higher level of noise than in the nighttime hours. So if you're very close to some person or thing with a bullhorn, then you're expected to be at a lower level in that lower distance.
How far is most sidewalks from businesses?
It really depends on the sidewalk, and I would defer to the transportation department to give that average.
Okay. Does somebody have that insight?
I have a follow-up question related to this, though. We get a lot of complaints about use of megaphones on Moore Square, people shouting obscenities and other things. How does this impact that?
So we have an anti-harassment ordinance that specifically deals with the harassment. This deals with the proximity, the loudness of the volume. And you can actually do damage to people's hearing in close proximity with a bullhorn. So this is, again, recognizing those First Amendment rights and also recognizing the rights of the unwilling listener.
Thank you.
Can somebody from transportation? And this would probably be with regards to sidewalks from businesses that are downtown, since most of our demonstrations happen on the sidewalks in the streets in downtown.
Good afternoon, Paul Calvin, Transportation. If you could just ask your question again, just so I make sure I can answer it correctly.
So one of the concerns that I had with this ordinance was how it impacts people who are protesting peacefully, different things that are happening in the state. We are a national or a capital city, so we get a lot of different sorts of people that come. And the use of blowhorns on sidewalks and like the distance, because with the noise ordinance, apparently it's 50 feet with a blowhorn from a reasonable person, and that could be the establishment. And I just wanted to know, like, what's the typical distance from a sidewalk to, like,
A building.
a building?
Yeah, and that'll vary. I mean, typically your rights of way downtown are 66 feet.
Okay.
So, take Fayetteville Street, you've got a larger sidewalk, anywhere from 15 to 20 feet. And then you go on some of your other side streets, then you're going to go down to, let's say, 6 to 10. So I would just say it's going to vary just kind of depending on where you're at in the downtown area on that.
And the general consensus for when you do demonstrations without permit is that you can't be in the street. So does that potentially impact that with when you have different, like, spaces for the sidewalk distance? That might be a not you question.
I'm not sure I totally understand. I don't know if Dottie, she can help on that one.
So this is the actual use of the bullhorn near the reasonable, or at the person. And so one way that you could avoid running afoul of the ordinance is to stop as people are in close proximity to you, regardless of what your message is.
Does that include establishments?
So this is the section that I'm talking about is the section that prohibits unreasonably loud and raucous use or operation on public places of a bullhorn loudspeaker. And that provision says you are not, that's a prohibited noise if it's done in a manner to be plainly audible during nighttime at a distance of 50 feet from the reasonable person, and during daytime at a distance of 300 feet from the reasonable person. So does that help?
So 300 feet during the day.
During the day, yes, ma'am.
So that would completely discount sidewalks.
It actually, it's the plainly audible. So you can hear it from 301 feet away, then it's a problem at the daytime hours. If it's plainly audible during night from 50 feet away from a reasonable person, then that's the problem. So in other words, you have more room for that amplified noise during the daytime hours.
Not really.
So if you're here and it's 300 feet, if you're within the 300 feet, then you're good by the ordinance.
If you're within 300
If you're
feet.
within 300 feet. If you're at 301, then it's a violation. So the sidewalks, a person, a building, they're probably within 300 feet.
Okay.
So they would be within compliance.
Okay.
In the daytime, with the idea louder in the daytime is expected.
Okay.
Councilmember Harrison.
And I just want to give an example of the feet. If you know kind of the length of a semi-truck trailer, they're about 50 feet. So 6 of those would be 300. One of them would be the 50 for the nighttime, just to give you an idea of the distance.
Okay.
Okay, did everybody get their questions answered? Okay, do we have a motion?
I move to adopt the proposed ordinances with a February 3rd, 2024 effective date.
We have a second? Okay. Councilmember Fort, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that was Black and Jones in opposition. Thank you. All right, next we have a report and recommendation of the Planning Commission.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council. Happy New Year. Bynum Walter, Planning and Development. I'm joined today by Blaney Miller, Chair of the Planning Commission.
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me 1 second. A second item was pulled, B3. I'm sorry.
Sorry, you did. I did. I'm so sorry. Thank you. I missed that too. Sorry. Yes. B3. This had to do with. This is Tilden. I just had some questions about it. Just so that clarifying that I understand, it is a piece of property that was willed to us as a city, and then we are now selling it to a developer. And I just had some questions on it, but I want to make sure that my foundation is understanding.
Yes, that's correct. Allison Punt, Planning and Development. In December 2018, the city accepted a bequest in support of public arts. And that bequest included a half interest in this property. So the city is not the only owners of 504 Tilden Street. We own it in conjunction with multiple heirs. We have a half interest, and these heirs together have a half interest. And so we're not able to fully dictate what happens with the property.
So both half interests are the ones interested in selling this property to whichever developer this is.
That's correct. We entered into a settlement agreement into how to market the property. And in October of 2023, this year, October 2nd, we began marketing it in conjunction with communication staff. We started with a listing price of $461,000, which was based on some appraisals that had been done. It was the higher of the two appraisals. We did email blasts, social media, held multiple open houses at that price. And based on feedback and the lack of offers at that price, we worked with the heirs to lower the price to $437,950. After that, we did additional email blasts, advertised again on social media, web advertising. It's picked up at the press. We held more open houses. And we received this offer at 97% of the then list price in December 8th of this year. So over 2 months after we started marketing it.
Right, and I think my confusion was I didn't understand the half ownership of it. I thought that we were in ownership, the full ownership, and my questions pertain to the fact that it's a 1,400 square foot house at the moment. It's very modest, but the developer is a very high-end developer who their portfolio is very nice, and I just didn't want to change the character of the neighborhood. But if it's not ours, we are half owners of it. Like I completely understand that that's not our say-so as to what happens to that property. That is a joint conversation, and I appreciate the clarification. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we have any other questions?
No, that was my only question. I'm not, if somebody else would like to do a motion, it wouldn't be for me.
We have a motion to approve.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Councilmember Jones opposed on that. Okay, thank you. Now we have the report and recommendation of the Planning Commission. Sorry about that.
Bynum Walter, Planning and Development, joined by Blaney Miller, Chair of the Planning Commission. We have a couple items coming out of Planning Commission, just a reminder about upcoming holidays. President's Day in February, and then March 18th through April 8th is Ramadan. You have some items already scheduled for public hearing. On the 16th, you do have 4 items in the afternoon, so some volume there already. You have a special meeting that you've scheduled for the 30th to hear a couple of the items coming out of Planning Commission today. You've already scheduled the public hearing for the comprehensive plan amendment and the rezoning for the New Bern corridor. Right, you did that back in December last year. And then we have 2 items scheduled for February 6th. Z72 is an old item in the Prince Hall Overlay District that's coming back. And then 0 Gorman Street will be here for public hearing after being heard at committee in this month. That's my expectation, based on what you have done at previous meetings. So first item coming out of Planning Commission, this is rezoning Z9222. Again, you have already scheduled a public hearing for this. This is rezoning a little over 700 parcels, a little over 700 acres along New Bern Avenue. It goes from downtown all the way out to Headingham Boulevard and Freedom Drive. This is adding the overlay, increasing height in some places, changing base districts and applying frontages in others, and then also, in some instances, removing legacy zoning conditions that are either very old or in conflict with the goals of transit-oriented development. Planning Commission did recommend denial. I just want to walk through some of they made a lot of recommendations in addition to that summary action. So they recommended that all the historic landmarks, the Raleigh historic landmarks, be removed from the request. They reviewed a couple of different height scenarios, and they recommended alternative C, which generally keeps height increases on larger parcels and between New Bern and Edenton. So there's that. They run as a one-way pair, and so that area.
Could you speak into the microphone?
I'm so sorry. Thank you, Madam Mayor. South of Edenton and north of New Bern, and then wherever the transit overlay district is mapped, They recommended that any existing neighborhood conservation district there be removed, recognizing that the regulations of the TOD really negate the neighborhood conservation district regulations, and that it's confusing to have them in place. The concern that people would misperceive, misunderstand that they had NCOD regulation when in fact the overlay was taking precedent. So here's that map of alternative C.
Yeah, could you go back to that? That's what I want to hear
Oh,
more
sure.
about. Like, so, okay, you're getting on the map. That's what I want to see. I want to get more specific.
Oh, okay. So alternative C puts the recommendations for additional height, again, between New Bern and Edenton, and then on larger sites. So this is 500 New Bern, that Explorer site, the DMV and Martin Street. These are commercial properties on either side of Tarboro, and then this is Zach's down on the east end here.
So could you explain what the recommendation is, though? Because those are, I mean, the DMV site, Zach's, I mean, those are sites that we want to have density and affordable housing. So how does that impact that?
Yes, ma'am. So the height recommendation here of 5 stories on those darkest blue properties is putting the most height on the biggest parcels or assemblages.
Okay, so moving it, help me understand this. I'm not following you, to be
Oh,
honest
I'm
with you.
sorry. Okay, so everything out here is generally 3 stories.
Right.
Entitled currently. And so the recommendation that the Planning Commission brought forward to you is to keep 3 stories generally north of Edenton, south of New Bern. But in the area between, they were comfortable with a 4-story height recommendation there for the rezoning. So that's that aqua, bright blue color on the map. And then the only places where they were suggesting more than 4 stories is these larger parcels, larger assemblages of 5 stories.
Okay, I had it kind of flipped when I was hearing what you were saying. So that's the DMV site, the Explorer site, the larger parcels.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you. That clarifies what I needed to know.
Okay. We received a lot of individual requests from private citizens asking for a variety of different things. The Planning Commission reviewed all of those. You can see in the eastern, so this is outside the belt line, a handful of requests out here marked with dots. In the middle stations, again, a handful of requests, and similar, more in the middle stations, and then the area closest to downtown, a lot of requests there. Generally, Planning Commission's recommendations follow a pattern. Residential property owner has to be removed. They generally were recommending approval of that. Commercial property owner in key location close to, like right on the corridor, they were generally not supportive of those requests. Requests asking for a lot more. They did not recommend make an approval or denial recommendation there. They felt like most than this 700 parcel process allowed, and so they weren't saying no, but they weren't saying yes. And then there were just some requests for greater entitlement that generally they were not supportive of. So those are kind of the big buckets of their actions that mostly fall into those categories. Lots of requests in that Western Station area. So just a quick rundown. They had a total of 50 requests, recommended approval of about a quarter, denial of about a quarter, or about half, and then no recommendation on about a quarter there. The other piece here is the comprehensive plan. That's the rezoning. Switching to the comprehensive plan amendment. This would amend the comprehensive plan. It would add an area-specific guidance section and amend the street plan. Planning Commission did recommend approval here. Already, you have scheduled the public hearing for this for the 30th. So Planning Commission made some recommendations around the comprehensive plan amendment. They had advice around equity and transportation safety, in deeper housing affordability, in neighborhood stabilization, specificity of language about history and culture, and additional guidance for rezoning decisions. So lots of those details are summarized in your packet, and we'll talk more about that at the time of the public hearing. They made a couple of recommendations outside of the rezoning and outside the comprehensive plan amendment. They suggested that you authorize a text change to review how neighborhood transitions are applied within the TOD. They also recommended that you authorize a study to review the interaction between maximum building heights and the TOD's density bonuses. And they also suggested that you might authorize a displacement study to identify areas most at risk for displacement and policies and actions to go along with that. Now, these are not you have not ever seen this before. You have not scheduled a public hearing on these items. You have a couple of options today. You could ask staff. We haven't done any work on these yet either, because this is Planning Commission talking to you, and then you tell me what to do, right? So we could bring back a weekly report item to you. We could bring these back as a special item. You could refer these pieces to committee for discussion. It's really up to you how you want to manage those pieces. And then I just wanted to offer some context about that public hearing coming up on the 30th. We're mailing letters, lots of letters. We will have posted notice. We will have advertised notice in the News and Observer. We'll be doing promotion on social media as well. We have scheduled some Ask a Planner events coming up on the 11th and the 18th at Tarboro Road in the afternoon. Those are Thursday afternoons. We've had good luck with folks coming and having questions answered, so they don't have to come to the public hearing. They don't bring those questions to you. They can come to staff and get that information. And then we're doing a Saturday one as well. That's the weekend after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. We'll be at Roberts Park in the morning on Saturday morning. So trying to make sure we've done a lot of events out in the public on this, but trying to make sure we do a good job helping people get ready for the public hearing. Then I have one final item coming out of Planning Commission, which is this change to zoning conditions on Old Watkins Road. This is 10 acres. It's heavy industrial zoning currently. It's the big change here would be a prohibition on landfill and an allowance for RV and boat storage. Planning Commission is recommending approval. This is published as January 16 in your agenda. You could also schedule this for February 6. It's really up to you how you would like to handle this. You'll have 4 items on the 16th and 2 on the 6th, so room on either one at the council's discretion. And again, Chair Miller here, if you have questions about Planning Commission's recommendations on any of these items.
Councilmember Harrison.
Yeah, thank you, Bynum. A couple questions. Could you go back to the slide about the studies that were proposed? I'll just put it out here that I would be curious to get a manager's report about what those studies could entail. I'm also open to other conversations for how we discuss that. Specifically, the displacement study is of great interest to me, as well as better understanding how the affordable housing density bonuses are being used in the TOD, and as well as the FTDO option. And when it comes to the displacement study, I would also want to identify what are, I guess we've got policies and actions there specifically focused on renters. I want to make sure that there be a major focus on renters. And I also, just while you're here from Planning Commission, would you talk about the conversation? I know the vote was 4-3, a denial of the TOD. And so could you just talk through a little bit of that discussion and the outcomes there?
Yes, sure thing. Blaney Miller, Chair of the Planning Commission. Let me open this up real quick. So we first heard these cases on our agenda in April, and we heard them over the case of 8 months at 5 special and extended meetings where we made the changes that Bynum already addressed. Our initial vote at the committee was to approve the rezoning case, and that vote was 6-2. There was one commissioner who was absent, and then we brought that TOD case to the full Planning Commission. We did not have additional changes at the Planning Commission table, but the final vote was ultimately to deny, and that was 4-3. The reason for that vote change was that 2 of the members who had voted for approval were absent, and one of the people who was absent at the committee. They did attend the final Planning Commission meeting, and they voted against. And in addition, Commissioner Lampman had originally voted yes, and then had voted to approve, and then she ultimately voted to deny. Didn't explicitly give a reason for her reason, but I think that the discussion ultimately came down to those that voted to deny specifically said that they supported the BRT project and that they supported the overlay district generally around that area and recognized that rezonings needed to occur. To briefly summarize, I think that the actual language of that motion was provided in writing, if you would like to see some of that. The reasons for denial that were stated were generally a lack of just the scale of rezoning and historic Black community that just warranted general, concern and the need for immense study. The other reasons were a lack of an ongoing impact assessment, the lack of metrics and performance measures, and the lack of confidence about community engagement with the most vulnerable population. Those that voted to approve cited specifically the rapid gentrification in the area, the concern that doing nothing would produce the most inequitable outcome possible, and the concern that postponing to a later date would, while waiting to define and develop another study, would lead to additional gentrification in the meantime. And also cited that the TOD bonus was the only change for the only way to provide for a significant amount of market rate affordable housing in this area. So we had a lot of discussions back and forth, and those that voted to deny generally also shared the same concerns of the people who voted to approve. They just, again, cited that the need for additional study and metrics, specifically with respect to displacement with respect to their votes, would be required before they could vote to approve on this case. So, but we sort of went back and forth. We all agreed that the additional metrics, certainly performance metrics and continuing study was going to be critical to evaluate the displacement. We also have to recognize that with these recommendations for studies, a lot of these studies and this work has already been performed. And in fact, I mean, this case is actually the New Bern Station Area Planning Study. And this has gone, taken place over the course of many years. However, some of these specific items perhaps could be taken out and reviewed more carefully, and more specifically perhaps, and looking at perhaps including additional metrics for what we should be studying and tracking in these areas in the future was something that would be of great interest to the commission as well. Is there anything?
Councilmember Branch.
So thank you for that information and that feedback. One of my great mentors and former council members says, we study, and we can study something to death. And this area has been studied a lot. I do recognize the concerns and the requests, and I am open to receiving that information in the manager's update, because I don't know what some of it will look like. I don't know what the impact would be, but I do know part of the requirement of us moving forward, there are federal requirements that have to be met, and so far, from my understanding, have been met because we've received federal dollars for the project. So definitely more information to see where we are. We have the public hearing set for the 30th. I would like to see if we can get a list of the properties that had a request to either be added or removed and where it is. I think we did that similar to the Western Corridor, where we had a lot of properties that people would say, I want to be added, I want to be removed. And we even had people that came up all the way up to the public hearing, still making requests to be added or to be removed from the list. So is that available as well?
Yes, sir, that's in the published backup, and you can also see it in the viewer online. One of the things that we've tried to do is improve transparency around who's asking for what, and that's part of the mailings that we'll be sending out, is letting folks know somebody near you asked for something during the Planning Commission's review process, during the public comment process, so that the just so folks know what has been asked for around them.
Gotcha. And I'm going to have a lot more questions on the 30th. I'm not going to belabor the point here today because the hearing has been set. I really look for a very good conversation on the 30th. I don't know where we will land on the 30th, but I do know construction has started.
Councilmember Patton?
Hi, thanks y'all for being here. Couple questions. One, I just want to make sure I understand the alternative C situation. It is the implication that they're offering alternative C as the totality of the TOD, like it would end there and there would not be any more TOD like down to Wake Med?
No, ma'am. This area between East and Raleigh Boulevard is the area where we heard the most public comment and concern about height. And so remember when we brought this forward to you to ask for an extension, gosh, that was back in the late summer, early fall, we talked with you about here's some options we're going to put in front of the Planning Commission to help them with their deliberation based on what we're hearing, right? And so this was there were a handful of choices. Keep the request as it is, make no height change in this area, and then alternative C was kind of in the middle, right? And this would just apply in terms of revising the request. It's only west of Raleigh Boulevard, east of East Street. So just the westernmost part of the corridor.
Okay.
So everything east, they're saying height as suggested.
However it is in
and
the
publicly
viewer.
discussed previously would remain. And we're just bringing it down a little bit in here because this part of the community was really sensitive to additional height.
Okay, got it. Thank you. That's helpful. It took me a second, so thank you. I also, with respect to the additional studies that are recommended, maybe you can provide like a more robust answer to this in a manager's update, but could you I know so much work has been done. Are there threads of work y'all have already done, and maybe if we repackage them, then they speak to some of these? Can you speak to any work that y'all have already done that might speak to some of these themes?
Well, I would say about the first two, the regulations of the overlay are the way they are intentionally, right? The transition or lack of transition requirements in the overlay as it currently stands was intentional, recognizing that we wanted more density proximate to stations, proximate to the corridor. That's what went through public review in front of Planning Commission and you. If you feel like that's not the right strategy, it would be a revision to the TOD, right? It would be a kind of a pivot. Similarly, around the building height and the density bonus, the height bonus tied to affordability that's in the TOD right now was very intentionally brought forward based on market analysis, heavily discussed by Planning Commission and Council before adoption. Hasn't been used yet, and I don't think we're, I talked about this when I talked with you in November. We're still in the window of it's not shocking that we haven't seen a project come forward yet, right? So I think, again, that would be a pivot in terms of the regulations of the TOD. And then the displacement study, the comprehensive plan amendment that comes out of the area plan, and so much of the work that I talked to you about from the Public Project Community Support Fund in November, I believe is all aiming at this, and so we would be doing some work to evaluate how we could go above and beyond that if we were to pursue an additional study here.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Fort, then Jones.
One quick question. I know in some of the previous conversations years back, maybe not most recently, we were talking about the concept of land banking and kind of doing some evaluation around that. I guess I would ask that as a part of the displacement study that we bring some of that information forward too, because that was a part of some of the earlier conversations, and it seems to have gotten lost in the dialogue.
Thanks for the input.
Okay, Councilmember Jones?
Councilor Branch, I had a question. You had referenced the federal dollars attached to it. Are you saying federal dollars attached to the BRT or attached to the TOD?
BRT.
So if the TOD, for whatever reason, is denied, that doesn't affect the federal dollars attached to BRT, or how does it? I guess that's a better question.
So my understanding, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, is that with BRT and supporting the federal government is looking for policies that support BRT, and density is one of them. That's why it's called, the Trans Overlay District is designed to increase density adjacent to BRT and properties that are directly adjacent to BRT. So that is what supports it. So the catch is not doing it now has the possibility to affect future dollars and future money, because the federal government will say, well, if our intent is to support bus rapid transit and density along those corridors, but yet you, Raleigh, chose not to do that, then how do we know you're going forward what you're trying to do to support connectivity and connect people to jobs and density? You're going to do it. So it's all about connecting the policy with the plan as we move forward.
And then another question to that, if the TOD is not passed, that doesn't restrict development. It doesn't say you can't develop in that area, right?
Well, it doesn't restrict development, but if you go along the corridor now where we don't have it, the things that we're trying to prevent from happening is happening. The goal is to try to create areas that we can have a higher number of people close to transit, so they do not need the need for vehicles, so that they can, not having a vehicle and able to get around impacts their income and the things that they do. So that is a way to also lean towards more affordability. So these are the things, it's all a puzzle. And this is just one piece and one tool of that complete puzzle in order to move us forward to help people who need it.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. And Blaney, I just wanted to ask, I know we talked about, or I'm sorry, that you talked about the metrics that both the people who are for the rezoning or the TOD and against it said, we do see this as a struggle, that we don't see the metrics so that we can check back. What did you come to a resolution that said, okay, these are the metrics we would like to see? Or if this is passed, then how do we know that any metrics will be adhered to?
At the meeting, I don't believe that we got specifically into the metrics. Subsequently, Commissioner Bennett sent a list of sort of expanding on her idea of a study in metrics. She provided that in writing, and I think she may have wanted to provide that to council as well, but that's not something that we specifically addressed at the meeting itself.
So how does the board or the commission feel we should as council address that?
That motion, again, by Commissioner Bennett, I wouldn't want to, of course, imagine specifically what she's thinking, but generally we were looking towards staff. And I know that Commissioner Bennett had some specific ideas about other studies that have been done in other cities, and she has a list of some of those that she has provided to staff separately if the staff were to want to look at that. But we were trying to sort of be as broad as possible in how to describe a study so that it could provide flexibility for council and staff to figure out how to structure that.
Right. No, I understand the studies, and I get that point, and what you guys brought up, studying and delaying. But I'm more talking about the metrics, that if this is passed, how can we make sure that in a year we've hit some sort of affordability? And that, I know I've said that as we've had these discussions before. I know that's what you guys have talked about. And if that's something that if this passes, I'm trying to sit here and go, what does that look like? Or what could it look like? And I'm wanting to understand what the conversation was with you guys on what you felt that could look like as metrics, not the studies.
Sure. I think, and we've spoken with staff some, I know they do some regular reporting on the type of applications that have, building permits and things like that have been pulled. And perhaps just creating a regular scorecard of the type of development and permits that are occurring in that area. I imagine staff might have might better understand the full scope of the ongoing metrics and reporting that they do with respect to tracking building and development in those areas. May I defer to you on that one?
This isn't great news. I think this is really gray. The mix of metrics that you would look at, you would be looking at how they add up together, right? There's not going to be a green check, we did it, at the end of this, because there are trade-offs on all of this. So we'd be looking and watching increase in residential density across the board. We'd be looking at increase in affordable units across the board. We'd be looking at rate of change in population, not just like gross number of people, but what are the demographics of that population look like, right? So we know from watching New Bern over time that the corridor has gotten, that households have gotten whiter and richer, and the houses have gotten bigger. Literally, the houses have gotten bigger. So I think we would be looking for a mix of all those things coming together. What do they add up to? But I think we could see different things. There's not going to be like there's not one right answer here. It's going to be watching to see what's happening, evaluating, correcting. I think I may have talked to you about Bacon the last time we talked about this and how closely we would be watching this and reflecting on this. It's dynamic. A lot of it is going to depend on the national economy, the local economy, market preference. There's just a lot in play here, and I feel like, that doing nothing we know is inequitable. So let's try something new, and keep an eye on it and see what happens.
Yeah, no, I
Is
totally.
it less inequitable?
Sure, and I totally understand what you're saying, and I promise this will be the last thing before I know other people want to speak. It is that I guess I'm looking for something that you've done in the past or that is done, let me say like missing middle, because you've had the same conversation with missing middle. What are the metrics? How can we watch? And we don't have those there either. So is there something in the past that we've done where we have a starting point to create a metric system that we can copy and then maybe alter to fit what BRT could be? Or is this us starting from complete scratch because we don't have metrics in anything else we do?
No, I don't think this is scratch. I mean, I think we have I just listed 4 or 5 things we would be watching.
Right,
I
but
think the
where
list
else
is
do
probably
we
more
do
like
that?
15 or 20. Where else do we do
Because
that?
I'm struggling to say that, like, when I'm talking about missing middle, I'm talking about here, when we get a report to say, hey, this is what our metric, this is what we're looking for, and what if it doesn't meet those metrics? What are the results because of that? It's not just what are we watching, it's what are the outcomes if that watch then starts going to the way we don't want it to go. What happens at that point?
So the citywide example is that the comprehensive plan says that 60% of our growth will happen in corridors and centers. And we watch volume of rezonings, permits pulled, location of permits pulled, and construction, and we see that growth goal, that growth vision is happening. That's where the action is happening, in the centers and corridors, just like we said we wanted, right? So the future land use map, the urban form map, zoning are all working together with policy to get to reach the growth vision, goal, outcome that we are looking for. So that's a citywide example. I would say missing middle is a more recent, more focused, where we're tracking very carefully and doing more work to continue to increase our tracking and numbers to understand what did the missing middle text changes, what kind of result did that have? How many units is that delivering, right? Like we know FTDO has delivered 60 affordable units into the pipeline without city subsidy. That's a really big win, right? So those
Right, and I think what's missing here, and it's important, and I don't ever want it to look like I'm trying to judge you, is that we haven't had that conversation because we've tried to have 2 closed sessions to have the missing middle discussion where we can see those wins, and we haven't had it yet. I thought we were having it today, and we're not having it today. And so for me to know, I don't know those things. You know all of that. I don't. So it's not me trying to attack you and say, oh, you're not doing anything. It's that I don't know those things. And so I'm trying to ask the questions now because I haven't had the space to ask them before. So again, I'm not trying to attack and say you're not doing anything. I'm saying I don't know those things yet. And when I learn them, I'll be able to put those in my toolbox to say, okay, this is what we're doing. But right now, it looks, I'm just trying to understand what metrics look like, and I don't see it yet. So that's just what I want to, and that'll be the last thing I know other people want to talk. And we'll probably get to it when we get to it in closed session.
Councilmember Melton?
I have a few questions on, it's page 4 of the Planning Commission report. It's the summary of Planning Commission's Committee of the Whole recommendations. I think you had a slide. Could you pull that back up? It was the 4 recommendations with the map of alternate C. Okay, so number 3, where it says wherever the TOD is mapped, any existing NCOD should be removed. Does that mean the NCOD should be removed from the property or the NCOD should be removed from the TOD?
From the property.
Okay, so it's basically saying TOD takes preference over that NCOD.
That's how the regulations already read, and the Planning Commission was looking for extra clarity on the map so that it was clear that the TOD is in control here, not the Neighborhood Conservation District.
And then number 1, remove Raleigh historic landmarks from the request. The map of alternate C, does that already have any historic landmarks exempted, or would we have to go back and do that?
I would have to look more closely. I'm sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head.
And then the last question I have is, there was some comment about alternative C being a middle between do nothing, do everything that was recommended. One thing to add to Councilmember Branch's comments about the density needed to support high-frequency transit, we also need to be looking at not allowing things like drive-throughs and surface parking lots and having a mix of uses. And so does this alternate C, which you described as a middle, does it still prohibit the drive-throughs in this area, and does it still allow for retail to be in the 3, 4, and 5-story buildings that are being proposed?
All that the height recommendation does is address height. So where the overlay applies, car wash, drive-through, those sorts of pedestrian unfriendly uses would be prohibited. All the other regulations of the TOD would still be, are still recommended.
So it's just the height then on the
It's
alternate
just
C?
the height. They're
Okay.
just bringing the height down.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
helpful. Thanks.
Councilmember Harrison?
Yeah, I just wanted to, excuse me, sorry, sign on to the performance metrics, perhaps being part of the displacement study, just to have a sense of exactly what those are. And thank you, Bynum, for outlining the ones that you did. I just wanted to mention a few, and probably some are also what you said, but basically, yeah, who is moving out and who is moving in, demographically speaking, how many times the density bonuses have been used for how many units, changes in property values, changes in median income, rent, how the community is being engaged through the process, and then perhaps something around neighborhood businesses, like their ability to stay in place or to be created. Those are just a few other elements that might be useful.
I just wanted to add to Councilmember Branch's comments regarding the FTA. Having met with the FTA several times, density and affordable housing is a top priority along these BRT corridors. What they expect is, number 1, their goal is to make things more affordable for people. So if you don't have to own a car, you can take BRT. You've just saved more than $10,000 a year. So that's part of the affordability piece. The other part that's important to them is building future transit. So what I mean by that is train travel. So all of this goes to a Rush Bus station. The hope is that people will take these, take the BRT, end up at Rush Bus, and then you're taking the train to Durham, or you're taking the train to Winston-Salem, or you're taking the train south instead of highways. So it's really looking at offering choice, but they have said time and time again, this is how you build ridership for the future. And density is an important piece of this, as is affordability. Any other questions?
I know the first 2 items are set. I moved to set the rezoning TZZ 49 23rd for February 6th.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay. Is anybody opposed? Okay. Did you get everything you need for the 30th?
Yes, ma'am, and we will plan to bring back a manager's report item with some additional information on those three, the transitions, the density bonus, and the displacement study.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. Councilmember Black, are you,
So are those things coming back? Like, are we moving those forward, the recommendations that came out of council or out of the planning commission around that, or is it just coming back in the manager's report? I just want to have the clarity around that.
So the rezoning and the comprehensive plan amendment are going to come back to you on the 30th at public hearing, and all the recommendations that the planning commission made regarding those items will be in front of you for your consideration. You could act on those items as initially presented to the public. You could act on them as with revisions recommended by planning commission. You could act on any other version that you as a body agree to. And then the three items for additional study, we're going to come back with that to you on manager's weekly report item in writing with some follow-up. As I said before, planning commission was talking to you, telling you about that recommendation. They hadn't really told me to do any work. They can't really tell me to do work. You do. And so now that you've said you want to hear more about those, we will bring you back some additional information to help you decide how you want to move ahead.
I definitely think it's a warranted concern. You did mention how doing nothing raises inequity, and I am concerned about how doing something can also raise inequity, specifically with like the history of urban renewal. And I am still trying to figure out the difference between this and that history. So I'd really be interested in seeing that in a manager's report and the future conversation that we have around it. Thank you so much.
okay, thank you. All right, next we're on to special items. The first is the appropriation from council contingency.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. Happy New Year. Sadia Sattar here from Budget and Management Services. I'm here to speak to you all about two council contingency items that were brought forward during the December 5th City Council meeting last year. So they contain two items, the first being from Mayor Baldwin in the amount of $13,700 to support events at the Martin Marietta Performing Arts Center for the annual Martin Luther King Day activities and festivities, and the second being from Councilmember Jones in the amount of $11,300 to fund a training program called Skills for Life, where adults interested in teaching dialectal behavior therapy will work in conjunction with Wake Med, as well as the city's Parks and Recreation Department, to provide two events to our community members. So if approved, these are $25,000, and if approved, you already approved two additional items in council contingency, one for Oak City Cares in August of last year, the other for the Great Raleigh Cleanup in October. So if you were to approve these two items today, you will have about $88,000 left in council contingency for the remainder of the fiscal year. So our recommendation is, should you approve these two items today, staff will work to disperse funding to Wake Med, as well as the Martin Marietta Performing Arts Center.
Do we have any questions? Councilmember Patton?
Yeah. Hi. I don't know if this one's going to be for you. As I've understood how what contingency is meant to support are things that pop up that are maybe time bound or otherwise couldn't have been predicted to need funding or act as seed money. I wondered, the MLK Day events, is this not an ongoing, predictable event? And I wondered, if it isn't more appropriate to have a different funding source and how it, why it needs to be coming from contingency. So I don't know if anyone can speak to that.
Yeah, last year they had to cancel because of changes in rules, so this year we're trying to avoid that.
What were the changes of the rules?
And how the Martin Marietta Center is used. They were asking for funding for things that they have to pay for. So as opposed to the city paying for it, they had asked them to pay for it. They could not raise the funds to do that. They canceled they had to cancel. And this year they had asked if we would consider waiving that. can't waive it because we've got to pay for it. So therefore, the request from council contingency.
Okay, so just making sure I understood what you're saying. So they used to have like a regular funding source in the form of city support for like fees and materials. And then last year we changed the policies.
Is Carrie here?
And so they,
Is Carrie Painter here? She's not here. Evan Raleigh can speak to that item. This has been a program that's gone on for years and years, and as the costs have escalated for the production of the event, these are costs that the city incurs, not anything that's associated with, say, like a rental or anything like this. This is security, folks working the event, and so.
Equipment.
Yeah, equipment rentals for some of the groups and bands and all.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Kind of picking up on what the city manager was explaining, the costs that these fees or this contribution is covering go to support direct cost of facilitating and producing this particular event as the organizers have envisioned it. My understanding is that some years ago, there were essentially these fees were just absorbed. Don't know all the history on that. This is one of the groups that unfortunately is not able to pay for the production that they want to have at the level that it would require. And so what this is now being presented to you is essentially a contribution to allow them to produce that event so that they don't have to incur those costs, which my understanding is they're not in position to be able to pay.
and so this group of people is like a nonprofit or a collection of private citizens or?
So if I may,
Branch.
because I've been interacting with the MLK committee and foundation since its inception, even before I was on council. These costs are things that historically the city really actually did just waive. There's been changes, as they stated, in overall costs. I think with that structuring and some restructuring that this committee has done as well, they're looking at things long term. But I think from a timing situation, because of it's next weekend. That's the reason why this request came to us. But I believe there's also going to be more conversation long term so we can figure out if there's another method. Because I think the point of your question, from my understanding, is contingency the best resource for this to come out of? I think based on the time frame for this year, it is. But I think we can look at something long term to figure out what they need and how we can better partner.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's just my concern is that I don't know that contingency is set up to support ongoing costs. And so that is my concern. I don't want to stand in the way of the event this year, but I would just make like a heavy-handed request that we figure out how we're going to manage that expense going forward, or how the committee is going to manage their expenses going forward.
Yeah. And to that point, if I may, Councilmember Branch, we certainly are having those conversations now and have had those conversations with the organizing committee to try to help them in that regard, to ensure that they're planning appropriately for the future and trying to make that plan for the event to be sustained, certainly if it's going to continue to happen at the facility. So we're working in partnership with them on that.
All my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move for approval of this item for funding for both Wake Med as well as the MLK committee requests.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have the report and recommendation of the city manager.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, and to our viewing audience, and happy 2024. So on today's report, we have 5 items, and the first of which is a public bid waiver for Raleigh Water for some technology. We have Gregory Jenkins from Raleigh Water here to present this item.
Good afternoon, Council, Mayor, Madam City Manager. My name is Gregory Jenkins II. I am one of the Assistant Directors in Raleigh Water. Today, I will have a short presentation for you for a bid waiver to purchase Neptune water meters. We are seeking a public bid exception based on Section E6, which states an exception can be granted if standardization or compatibility is an overriding consideration. If granted this exception, we will not change Raleigh Water's commitment to ensuring prices maintain competitive in the market, and to also prevent us from, well, it will also not prevent us from having competitive bids in the future. We had 3 competitive bids in the last 10 years, as you can see in 2015, 2018, and 2020. Here are a few characteristics about our meter system. Size and growth are the main takeaways. We have maintained and added to the system through a staff dedication and tireless effort. Staff is trained regularly on how to install properly, conduct maintenance, as well as safely remove meters. Standardization allows us to optimize training and to work efficiently and effectively when delivering customer service to over 600,000 people in our service area. Also, standardization supports our billing staff by integrating our Oracle billing system with our 1 meter reading system. This integration is critical to billing on time and correctly. And I'm open up for any questions.
Any questions? Okay. Do you have a question?
Councilmember Branch?
Councilmember Patton?
Okay. I saw you pull your mic. Hi, I do have questions.
Okay.
I don't have any grievance with the company or their water meters themselves. It sounds like they do a great job. I am a little concerned from like a trust and transparency, public trust lens, thinking about waiving a public bid waiver. And in the backup, it mentions that they've won each open bid over the last 20 years. So I wonder if you can speak more specifically to like why we wouldn't just let them win this bid also and do the process again.
So one is that we do have, we've experienced shipping delays, right? We are already bidding. We are already purchasing meters that are going to be delivered a year to a year and a half from now. That's one reason. I think the other is that we are always exploring opportunities to see if another meter is compatible, right? And so when we are trying to set the stage, right, for those opportunities, we were just looking for a waiver this one particular time. But at the same time, we don't want to slow down the process knowing that we don't want to run out of meters, right? Because we ordered them in such a large allotment.
Okay. So the ones that you would order, if you're granted the waiver and then you place an order, those ones will be coming in a year and a half
Or
from
longer,
now?
yes.
Okay. And then when would you're saying you're requesting a waiver for this one particular time. So when would be the next time it would come back, like in two years? Would there be another open
right now,
bid, or-
we're asking a waiver for 4.4 million, I believe is the exact number.
So when you
So once that
bought
contract
that
runs
amount
out,
of meters,
we will
then
come back to
You'll come
council.
back for another bid. I understand. Okay. How long does it take to do the bid? If you were not to get the waiver, how long does it take to do the bid?
I can't really say on that, because I wasn't here the last time it was done. But I mean, I could, Whit, do you have an idea of the last time how long it took?
Probably best case scenario, 90 days if all of the stars align totally perfectly. Probably 120 days really to be reasonable. By the time we get the specs out, get the advertisement out, do the solicitation, review the bids, bring it back for approval, get the PO and contract executed, we're talking 3-4 months.
Okay.
Don't you think that's fair?
Those
Do
are all
we
my
have any other questions? Okay, do we have a motion?
Move for approval.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Councilmember Patton opposed. Okay. Next, we have, it's on you. Go, girl.
The next item is an affordable housing gap funding opportunity for a project on Battle Ridge. And we have Emila from Housing and Neighborhoods as opposed to Christopher to present this item.
That's right. Thank you. Good afternoon, Council Mayor. I am here seeking approval from council to provide gap financing for a proposed 200-unit senior housing project. Here's an overview. The developer is East Carolina Community Development. They applied through the city's competitive notice of funding availability. They're proposing, again, a 200-unit affordable senior rental community at 6525 Battle Bridge Road. You'll see the map there. It's approximately 32 acres. They will be leveraging and utilizing the 4% low-income housing tax credit to develop it. Here's the project unit mix summary. You'll see there's varying income levels served, as well as unit counts and tenant rents. I do want to note that this includes 40 supportive housing units, specifically set aside for people with disabilities and people with additional support service needs. Here's a list of the project funding. So as I mentioned, they're going to utilize the 4% LIHTC equity. There's going to be a permanent loan. The City of Raleigh loan will cover 10% of the project. Wake County is also being requested to fund this project. And then they're deferring a developer fee in order to get them just under the $50 million mark. Here are the list of available funding sources for the city. So you'll see there's designated affordable housing funds at about $3.4 million. Program income from loan repayments, surplus property sales, et cetera, will be utilized, as well as federal home funds, reallocated ERA2 funds. So you'll see here the total available for rental development is about $7.7 million. And with this coming out of that, if council approves, the remaining available for future commitment will be just about at $2.7 million. So again, the funding request is here, requesting $5 million from the city. As I mentioned, they are also applying to Wake County for $4.5 million. The interest rate will be 1% with a loan term of 40 years, a minimum affordability period of 40 years, and the total developmental cost, again, is just under $50 million. So this is seeking approval from council to provide gap financing for this 200-unit affordable senior housing project and to approve the $5 million conditional gap financing commitment.
Okay, any questions? Councilmember Branch.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is, with roughly just under 3 million left, are there any other developments between now and June 30th that could be coming asking for assistance for GAP?
That's a good question. Lamont, are you in the room? Can you answer that question?
No.
Members of council, Mayor, members of council, Lamont Taylor with Housing and Neighborhoods. So this does include all of our commitments as well as what we know of at this time.
Okay.
That doesn't, of course, preclude additional asks, but this is our available budget at this time.
Okay. So basically, if there are any other requests that superseded this amount, you would get with finance and see if there were any other resources, or you would just tell them we're out?
We would work with the developer to either get that cost down, or we would have to make a firm decision about what we could afford to pay, what's in our coffers.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
So yes, that would drive a decision.
Okay.
Okay, Councilmember Patton.
Yeah, hi. Hi. I was just noting that the affordability period on this project is 40 years, and we're accustomed to seeing 30, and 40 is great because it's longer than 30. But I'm curious, how did we accomplish that in this case, and can we do more of it?
Yeah, that's another good question. Lamont, can you address that one as well? Or I'm not sure what the mechanism is there. How do we get to the 40-year minimum affordability in addition? to the LIHTC requirements.
It's our policy to have a maximum affordability. And we want to make the units available for as long as reasonably possible.
Our city policy is 40.
No,
40.
maximum.
The maximum.
The maximum is 40.
Is 40.
The maximum is
Yes,
40.
and our goal is to maintain affordability throughout the estimated useful life. So we want to keep it affordable for as long as it can.
Lamont, can you take your mask off or speak into the mic? I don't think they can hear you.
Very sorry for that. So yes, our goal, and that is the maximum, and our goal is to promote affordability for the maximum estimated useful life of the property.
Okay. On the slide,
So
it
on
says,
average, Councilmember Patton, to help Mr. Taylor a little bit there, we typically land in the negotiations around 30. That's pretty much what we see as a standard. So to get to 40 obviously is a win, and it is in compliance with our policy, but we're not always able to get to the 40-year commitment from the developers and all of the interested parties in the development.
okay. Well, I love that we reached 40, and so however we can replicate that on more projects would be great.
Motion to approve.
Sorry, I didn't see you.
Councilmember
So
Fort?
you've indicated that the county has been requested. Do you know where they are in their process of actually approving the requested funds?
I think that they're presenting in January to their commission. It's not, yes. So they're going to be presenting this proposal to their commission this month as well.
Okay. So motion, do we have second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Good work.
The next item is an annual report for the Neighborhood Traffic Management Program, and we have Will Shoemaker from Transportation here to present this item.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Will Shoemaker. I'm the Mobility Development Supervisor, and one of my roles is to oversee the implementation of the NTMP, the Neighborhood Traffic Management Program. In today's meeting, we're going to give a quick overview, present out the annual report, which is a policy requirement, report out to you as a council for the first time the ballot results of the 20 streets that we've been working with throughout the year. Again, the program was set up in a way that we come to use because you have the ultimate authority to move projects forward to construction or to stop that from happening. And then finally, we want to set the work plan for 2024. So just a brief overview of what traffic calming is and what Raleigh's response to that need is that the US DOT has a very technical definition, but it's ultimately designing streets to encourage slower driving behavior that's speed compliant. Raleigh's response to this need is the implementation of the NTMP, where we have 3 buckets: multi-way stops for intersection safety, speed limit reductions to set more appropriate speed limits within residential settings, and then traffic calming projects where we identify habitual speed compliance needs. And the vision of the NTMP is to improve safety, improve speed compliance, and enhance the quality of life along Raleigh's residential neighborhood streets. And speed is a major contributing factor to being able to determine the livability of an area. So focusing on slowing down drivers and increasing that safety will help us achieve our Vision Zero goals and help make Raleigh's neighborhoods places that are full of life and vibrancy and not just a fast way for drivers to get from point A to point B. In 2023, we saw a slight decrease in number of requests by about 9%. This number is a little bit skewed because with speed limit reductions, a lot of times we're working with those communities to not just capture the one street, but capture full subdivisions. So that's how we're still reducing. We did 225 last year, 185. How we're getting these more, reducing more number of streets than we're actually getting the requests. We were able to complete 19 traffic calming projects throughout 2023. And then one kind of interesting take is that we've seen a shift in where the requests are coming from. We saw about a 30% reduction in the number of speed limit reduction requests to the city because we've been reducing hundreds and hundreds of them over the past couple of years. So we're starting to quench that need. But the shift is now to the traffic calming request. That was up by about 21%. And so looking at that, we got more streets qualified this year than we have in any other past year, but we looked at the rate, and we're still at about a 60 to 70% of the time when we lower the speed limit, no further action is needed. So that's really encouraging to see that the rates of speed compliance are still working, but it's just we're finding more streets with need, which is great because it enables us to help those neighborhoods and those people. We have not been able to complete the after studies for the full 19 projects. That's scheduled to take place January, February of this year. But due to some initial neighborhood concerns about some of the projects that we completed this past year, we were able to complete 3 after evaluations. All 3 of these streets have a speed limit of 30, and then the 85th percentile speed, which means that 85% of drivers were going at or under that speed, was about 37 to 39 on all 3 streets. We've successfully lowered all those, the 85th percentile speeds to be within about 1 to 2 miles an hour of the speed limit. So we're seeing really good success. On the very small sample case of the 3 streets that we have completed them so far, but these 3 will be reevaluated with the official after study here this month or next month. And then another positive, a lot of these streets had habitual crash problems. So since the completion of all these 3 projects, there have been no identified speed-related crashes since mid-December, whenever we were putting this report together. Now we're going to look forward to the 20 streets that we worked with throughout 2023. We're going to be talking about the balloting here, and it's a 2-tier ballot, and what the purpose of this slide is to really demonstrate pretty simply. Whenever we talk about on-street, it's going to be the blue parcels that you see here. So it's the properties that are physically touching the street, and then the greater neighborhood is shown here in orange, and it's about the approximate 2 blocks surrounding the street and all cul-de-sacs. So it's trying to get that greater drive area. And once we get out of gridded networks, it gets a little bit harder to get that 2-block radius, but we really try to capture the drive shed so we're getting a full picture of who's using the street and then how this will be impacted to those using it if we do install a traffic calming project. So of the 20, we had 14 that passed all policy thresholds. You can see them listed out here. You can see the street approval threshold of a minimum of 70%, and then the greater neighborhood has a required minimum of 60%. On the right chart here, you can see 2 streets, Hunting Ridge Road East and then Du Bois Street, have that second number listed underneath there. And so what that is a participation level. So to get these, there's no minimum participation rate, but we were going through and finding that sometimes on-street people really wanted a project, and the greater neighborhood said no for whatever reasons that may be, but they didn't want to have to slow down to get to their properties. And so this split decision was causing projects to fail to move forward because the greater neighborhood was saying no, even though the folks that deal with the speeding in their front yards was saying yes. So we added in a split decision, a tiebreaker vote, where if they have a minimum of 50% participation, that is the tie-breaking vote, and however the street votes, it moves it forward. So Hunting Ridge Road East and Du Bois Street both had above a 50% participation level for on the street, and since they met that minimum 70% approval rating, they met all policy thresholds, so we're recommending that these 14 move forward. So we started the year with 20 streets, 14 passed, that means that 6 did not. Want to get into these a little bit more. So Brooks Avenue and Arnold Palmer, the 2 at the bottom, they pretty resoundingly told us they did not want that, so I'm not going to go into any greater detail with those. One kind of caveat is just because a street votes no doesn't mean that the speed compliance issue just magically goes away. You know, we were offering projects to all of these streets and every one that's on the future project list for a reason, but ultimately the NTMP and traffic calming projects are a neighborhood choice and not a mandate. But looking at the top 4 streets here, so Mill Burney Road East, it missed the on-street approval threshold by 1 vote. And actually, coincidentally enough, over the Christmas break, an individual on the street reached out to me and said, I didn't get my ballot, I threw it away, I want the project. But it was after the balloting period closed, so they still technically failed, but just wanted to add that piece that if they would have gotten their ballot, or if they would have reached out to us during the balloting period and cast their official vote, that would have been an approval that would have been on the slide before that. Hunting Ridge Road Middle is another one that was extremely close, that it was 1 on-street vote yes away from from meeting all approval thresholds, and again, recommending it to go forward. And then I'm going to skip Grove Barton for just a second. Hartsville Road East, it was not as close, but it was still pretty close. So as you can see, there's a huge difference between on-street versus greater neighborhood. The on-street participation rate failed to hit that 50% threshold by 4 ballots. If we would have gotten 4 in, as long as it was 2 yeses and 2 nos, it would have still met that 70% approval threshold. So again, these 3 were extremely close, just a matter of a couple ballots away, and then 2 of them 1 ballot away. So wanted to bring those up for council discussion, but again, we have policy thresholds where staff can move things forward through administrative action and through this presentation. So we're not necessarily recommending that you as council make any recommendations on these 3, but wanted to make sure that we highlighted how close these 3 were so you can have that discussion if you feel it appropriate. And then lastly, Grove Barton Road, we will be recommending that you waive the voting thresholds and for this project. And it's a very unique situation where Grove Barton Road is almost exclusively multifamily housing with townhomes, condos, apartments. And so individuals own their units, but they don't own the land. So it's all the on-street properties here were open space, were HOA-owned property, were just grass and wooded lots. So we sent ballots out to all the HOAs and the property management companies, but none of them responded back. That's why we have a not applicable percentage here. So we got 0 response from those properties that actually were there. But again, those properties were vacant lots and open spaces. So with that, we don't want to be punitive to the people that actually live there, the actual people. And since they had a 65% approval rating from the greater neighborhood, we're requesting that you move this forward because the actual people voted to approve this project, and we didn't want to have this project fail due to some a bureaucratic oddity. Another thing that we want to do today is to look at 2024 and how we can continue to drive this program forward. Traffic calming projects in Raleigh are offered using a worst first approach. The 20 streets you see before you are the 20 streets that we currently know about that have the greatest quantifiable need. So we will be requesting council's approval to begin the neighborhood engagement and design work throughout 2024 to see if these folks, these neighborhoods want a traffic calming project to hopefully be built in 2025. And then to wrap up my presentation, so the requested council action for today is to authorize construction for the 14 projects that met all policy thresholds in the 2023 traffic calming project offering list, with an add-on that staff recommends council waive the adopted ballot policy thresholds for the Grove Barton Road and authorize construction for that 1 additional traffic calming project. And then secondly, we would request that you approve the 20 projects from the 2024 traffic calming project list for neighborhood engagement and design activity. And that wraps up my presentation. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions? Councilmember Branch, Patton, then Black.
So thank you for the presentation information. Obviously, this isn't my first time addressing these and working towards this. And I know also historically in the past, when you have a list of those that may have just missed it and things of that nature, you present that. And I appreciate that. And then council makes the final decision. And, my input would be to, as well as with Grove Barton Road, Hunting Ridge Road, and Millburney Road East, and Hunting Ridge Road Middle, including them, because they're right there at that 70, but also the neighborhood approval for those was clearly above the 60. So that's my reasoning for that. Harper Mills, my only heartburn is that 27.06%. And why I'm not mentioning that one. But that would be my recommendation, my amendment to the motion for authorizing to move forward, but include Millburney Road East and Huntington Ridge Road Middle, as well as Grove Barton Road with the traffic calming.
Councilmember Patton?
Hi, thanks for being here. I was curious, well, I have several questions. My first one being, your chart showing the 3 traffic calming projects and the change over time is very compelling. It shows the volume has almost halved on those streets, which is great. I mean, people are choosing to take other routes. I'm curious if you all measure like where that traffic goes, and specifically like Harps Mill Road is a major cut through from my neck of the woods over to Falls of the Neuse, and I noticed that Hunting Ridge Road is like parallel. So I'm curious if people are just like now using Hunting Ridge Road. So anyway, the question being, do you track where the traffic goes?
So the easy answer is no, we don't immediately track that. These numbers are actually quite striking. Typically, we see it within 15%, like the historical average of the other 49 or so projects have within 15% before and after volume. So these projects are not necessarily designed or intended to divert traffic. They are intended to slow people down to the speed limit or eliminate and reduce crashes. So to be completely honest, we were quite surprised at the number of vehicles reduced here. With the after studies, why we do it 6 months is because most people have a very intense and immediate reaction when there is a change. And so I don't want to necessarily hang my hat that this is the permanent state, because all these 3 studies were done within the first month of these projects being on the ground, and so people were reacting to them. So here in January, February, we will get that updated. If those numbers are still this big, we can certainly take a look at to see where these people went. But anecdotally, I'm not hearing of a pickup of any of the surrounding streets. So that kind of tells us that they're sticking to the thoroughfares as opposed to using neighborhood streets to really quickly get through. So we're eliminating that cut-through traffic and keeping access to local. But definitely, as we do our official 6 to 9 month after studies, we can take that into account if we see volumes drop at this rate.
Cool. Awesome. That's helpful. Thank you so much. I can support the amendment to add Milburnie Road and Hunting Ridge Road since they missed by one single ballot. I wanted to ask about the stark distinction on the Harps Mill Road East between the on-street neighbors and the broader neighborhood. So you brought to us that if 4 more ballots had been returned and if 2 of those had been a yes, then this would have cleared. And I am curious about like bystander effect and other experiences people might have when they receive the ballot. Like, everyone else on my street will vote and I don't have to do it. I'm curious if you could explain what is shared on the ballot. Like, how much detail about the policy do we give the residents in terms of like letting them know how much ballot clearance is going to be needed and that type of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the ballot is not an isolated event by any means. It is the end of about an 8-month process. So we start with the first meeting is an introduction to traffic calming and a preliminary design meeting where we teach about what the concept of traffic calming is. We go over the balloting thresholds, like what the approval rating needs to be. We outline the general timeline of like, okay, we're going to come back multiple times. It's going to end in a ballot. We go over the pros and cons for each traffic calming treatment, and then we put forward what we as staff feel like is a best practice design for their street and their unique conditions. From there, we solicit feedback from, and one other thing, we actually go out and paint generally the size and the location of all the treatments on the street so people driving can visualize what that project's going to look like. In addition to having the PDF versions that they could see that bird's eye view. And so we solicit feedback for about a month or so where we're having that community conversation, seeing if they like it, what they don't, do we miss an area that really need to be better addressed. And then after that period closes, we as staff and the design team gets together, updates the plan to the best of our ability. If they're asking for something that is not legal, we can't do that, but anywhere that there's valid comments and valid tweaks to the design, we try to accommodate to the best of our abilities. And then we come back again to them and say, hey, this is what you told us. Here's how we can manipulate the design. Here's the updated design. Do you have any more feedback? And then we quickly turn that around because the ballot immediately follows that last process. And on the ballot itself, it shows where to view the project, how you can reach out, gives other just general information as well as pointing to the website where we have all those balloting approval thresholds. And then the question that we ask is, do you want this project constructed, yes or no? So we really simplify it to a yes/no question. And then to make sure that we try to capture as many people, because we do rely on the post office to deliver, thousands of pieces of mail as we go through this process across 20 streets. We post yard signs on every single street saying ballot period. Here's our email, here's our phone number. Call us if you have questions. Call us if you didn't get the mailer. I mean, it doesn't obviously say that because it's on a placard, but that's the intent of this, to let people know that there's a ballot process going on and our contact information, so that anyone that has questions or didn't receive a ballot can reach out for further clarification.
Got it. Excellent. That's super helpful. Thank you. And I just have one more. I was really glad to see Wide River Drive. All the ones in my district are ones that are on my radar, so I was glad to see all of them, but Wide River Drive in specific, I just wanted to flag for you, and I'm sure you're already going to do this, but I think there's like considerations for roadway improvements there at Falls of the Neuse, and there's a big park project happening at the Neuse River Park as part of the bond, and so I just want to make sure we factor in like the sort of changing circumstance as you like enter into any considerations.
Absolutely, we do our best to work across department lines and different groups. So we'll absolutely take that into consideration.
Awesome, thanks.
Councilmember Black.
Well, since I went last, a lot of my thoughts on what I wanted to say were taken. Hello, nice to see you again. Happy Gregorian New Year. My comments were just specifically about the one that was in my district that failed by one vote, and just wanting to put that in for actually having it approved. So that was already stated.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, do we have a motion?
I move to authorize the construction of the 14 projects that meet all policies thresholds in the 2023 traffic calming project, as well as adding Grove Barton Road, Millburney, and Millburney Road East and Huntington Ridge Road, and also approve the 20 new projects to be considered for traffic calming.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, that was unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so before Mr. Shoemaker makes his way back to his seat, I'd just like to acknowledge we have worked really intentionally over the last several years to refine and update this program to something that is user-friendly, something that is easy to comprehend and understand and use throughout the city, not just from a staff perspective or a council perspective, but from a community perspective. And what you see today is direct results of that work over the last year and a half. So to Will and team, thank you for a job well done. This is how it's supposed to be done, to move projects in a city this size. So good job.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Next, we have the American Rescue Plan update. We have our CFO, Allison Bradshaw, and Sadia Sitar from Budget and Management Services here to present this item.
All right, good afternoon and Happy New Year, Mayor and Council. I'm Allison Bradshaw with the Finance Department, and I'll be joined by my colleague Sadia Sitar from Budget and Management Services for today's presentation on ARPA. All right, so here's today's agenda. I'll kick us off with an overview of ARPA and speak to the city's phased approach to fund projects in the community. I'll cover a few examples of our funding at work, and then I'll turn it over to Sadia to review our current status and recommendations for the remaining balance of funding. So the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, was signed into law in March of 2021 as a result of the global pandemic. The federal government allocated funding to local governments, and the city of Raleigh received $73.2 million in direct funding. And this has certainly been described as a once-in-a-lifetime gift. The city chose a very methodical, three-phased approach to ensure the funding was allocated in the community where it was needed the most. The 8 areas of funding include community health initiatives, housing and homelessness, economic recovery, infrastructure, nonprofit support, public safety initiatives, community engagement, and to ensure the city established a robust system to allocate the funds, an administrative oversight team was approved. And since 2021, there have been many additions and changes to the federal guidance. However, the date to utilize the funds has not changed. All funds must be obligated by the end of this calendar year, 2024, and expended by the end of calendar year 2026. So the city developed a three-phased approach which started in August of 2021. Phase 1 focused on funding the most impacted by the pandemic, and funding was used to support nonprofit agencies through the Human Relations Committee, small business support, and the hospitality sector. Phase 2 focused on housing and homelessness, infrastructure, community health initiatives, and other economic recovery activities. Phase 3, which just ended, focused on public safety, community engagement, and continued support for community health, economic recovery, and infrastructure initiatives. All of those prior funding decisions are summarized on this chart. Each of the funding categories are highlighted here. I won't read each of the figures to you that total the $73.2 million allocation. With the planned site acquisition, which is actually next on the agenda, there remains a balance of $1.4 million that has actually not been allocated at this time. So aside from the planned site acquisition, community health initiatives received over 18% of the funding, followed by housing and homelessness, which received over 16%, and infrastructure projects received 15% of the total. And that's just to really highlight a few of the categories. So here are just 3 of the projects where the funding has gone to work in the community. The first is a mobile engagement bus. Now what you see on the screen is actually a van because the bus is on order, and this will enable staff to meet the community in locations throughout the community, so in other words, to meet folks where they're at. $1 million was utilized to strengthen capacity building efforts for nonprofit agencies throughout our community. And funding was allocated to support affordable housing, in this case, Milner Commons. So again, these are just a few of the projects, and I would direct those interested to the city's ARPA website for more information, including the city's annual reporting, which is required to the federal government, to the Treasury Department. And so with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Sadia Sattar to review the current status and recommended appropriations.
Thank you, Allison. Sadia Sattar from Budget and Management Services. As we review the current status of ARPA funds here in the city of Raleigh, I do want to remind City Council that we've made some really good strides around the community with the usage of ARPA funding here in the city of Raleigh. Some of the things that we did right off the bat was that we were the first in the state to actually initiate monitoring of our recipients and see how they're spending those funding to make sure that we are in compliance. Something else that we do on the regular, which is why we're actually having this agenda item, is that we conduct quarterly updates or meetings with our recipients to ensure if they are spending those funds accurately, if there have been any changes to those projects, any initiatives that have moved, any goals, any scopes that have changed, and also have any projects completed. And by doing all of these things, we are happy to announce that we do have funding that we can reallocate to other initiatives here in the city of Raleigh that meet City Council initiatives, meet your wants, meet the community priorities as well. So with that, I'd like to remind also, before I move forward to my next slide, I do want to say here in the green we have another subtle reminder that these funds do have to be obligated by December 31st. So with that, we have about $6.532 million that is available for reallocation. And here are the various buckets that these funds come from. So we've got about $1.89 million that are left from the funding that was set aside for economic recovery and infrastructure efforts. We've also got about $3.5 million that have been returned to us from various grants. So these are grants that either the scope has changed or in the case of Self-Help and Beacon Point, unfortunately, those funds were returned because the organization couldn't comply with federal guidelines that these funds need in order to be expended. And then we also have interest income in the amount of $1.139 million. So overall, we have about, like I said, about $6.5-ish million available for reallocation. And here are some recommendations, again, to remind City Council that these are in line with some of the priorities that you have expressed in prior City Council meetings and in other meetings that we've had. And of course, other department-wide needs that we've heard over the course of ARPA funding that we've received, as well as our community's wants and asks that we've heard throughout our engagement processes. So here are the 4 buckets that we have identified for reallocation, the first being downtown needs, as well as some community projects around the city, some studies and assessments that we'll be able to do around the city as well by reallocating these funds. And then again, our 4th bucket is dedicated to getting some radios as well as some MDTs and some other items to our public safety departments here in the city of Raleigh. So starting off with our first bucket, which has to do with our downtown investments, this is something that we've heard a lot about from City Council, as well as our partners here, businesses here in downtown Raleigh, to really invest in downtown Wi-Fi, some plaza shade structures, to really bring folks back to downtown, make our outdoor spaces more inclusive, more inviting, and to get people down to Fayetteville Street. So this is a total of $525,000. Our second bucket has to do with community and citywide projects. So I'm going to go through them line by line. The first is reconstructing the entrance for the Performing Arts Center. I believe this will allow us to create a driveway where guests can be dropped off right in front of the center. The second is related to some upfits for Southeast Raleigh Promise. These are some tenant upfits that we will be able to do through the ARPA reallocation funding. The third is a CRM implementation. This was an item that was funded as part of the budget process, so these are some ongoing costs, unfortunately, that we don't have currently in our general fund budget, so ARPA will allow us to keep ensuring that that program stays on point. Our 4th item is doing some office upgrades for our Human Resources Department that is expanding and will allow staff some decent space. And then the last item here in this category is providing $100,000 to the North Carolina Theater for some art support. Our third bucket is to allow us to conduct some studies and assessments throughout the city. And again, a lot of these are some of the priorities that Council has mentioned. The first having to do with a railroad quiet zone study. This was a pretty robust manager's update item back in October, but again, will really allow us to have a look at or assess quality of life improvements in the downtown area, especially where these railroad crossings are. The second is providing $200,000 for a continuity of operations planning consultant. Especially in this day and age, it is imperative that the City of Raleigh has a robust response to any emergency or, God forbid, any disaster. So this will really help us enable our departments to develop those plans to meet the need should and when it arise. Our third need for $200,000 is for some tree lighting investments, and not just for tree lighting, but really around the streetscape or landscape around Fayetteville Street. Apparently those lights haven't been turned on for the past 6 years or so, so really help us work with the consultant to assess our electrical infrastructure there to make sure that those lights turn on eventually. Our fourth item, something again that we've heard a lot about in City Council, is traffic and safety study updates for Glenwood South. I'm a resident of Glenwood South. I appreciate that we're doing this, but it'll really allow us to not only update the Glenwood South streetscape plan, but help create a more flexible and usable environment for not only the residents, but all the folks that come and access that area, especially over the weekends. And last but not least in this category, we're looking forward to setting aside about $100,000 to conduct a sociable city assessment. This is particularly important, especially given the surge of visitors that we've had around downtown, around the city, and it'll really help us improve our city's social economy moving forward. Last but not least is our fourth bucket, which is dedicated towards public safety investments around the city. So the first being for police mobile data terminals. At the moment, our police officers are having to share these MDTs. This will allow each officer to have their own personal MDT, again, allowing for more efficiencies. The second item is to replace fire's radios. So we were actually able to replace a third of their inventory during last year's budget. This will now allow us to complete all of them, the remaining 2/3, I mean. So it's a really opportune time to make sure that they have all new radios moving forward. And then last but not least, we've heard from City Council members the need for a staffing and scheduling study to really assess, not just within public safety departments, but in departments, citywide, what our footprint needs to be to, as we're growing as a city and what our needs are. So that totals to about $2.9 million overall in this particular bucket. So as a reminder, we're fortunate enough to reallocate about $6.532 million in ARPA funds in 4 buckets. So setting aside just a tad bit over $500,000 in downtown investments, setting aside $1.8 million for community-wide and citywide projects, setting aside $1.3 million for studies and assessments, and then of course $2.9 million for public safety. So I know I ran through that really fast, but our recommended action for City Council here today is if you could please approve these budget amendments and transfers to reallocate this funding, and then staff will continue to do what it's been doing so far, which is monitoring and working with our subrecipients to ensure that we are spending these federal dollars accurately. And with that, I am myself and Allison Bradshaw here are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. What questions do we have? Councilmember Pat?
Yes. Hi. Hi. Could you go to the slide with the community and city projects? Yes, thank you. Can you, I read the agenda back up, and then I know what some of these stand for, but can you, for the public, just give us a quick overview of the CRM implementation and the HR office suite upgrades, and like particularly why the public is benefited by these investments?
Absolutely. So I will start off with the HR suite office upgrades. And I'm sorry, I'm just coming back. I seem to have lost my voice, and it's coming, and I feel like it's going back again, but I'll try. Great. So our HR department is here, as you're all aware, on the first floor of the RMB. And this will include, oh my God.
She's losing it. Let me help you a little bit while you get some water.
Thank you. Yeah.
So our HR staff is all over the city. Technically, we have folks on Martin Street, we have folks in this building, we have folks in the professional building. So this is just a way of making sure that all of our staff can best support our employees in a professional setting, in a way that they're not having to share a cubicle between 2 and 3 people. There is some office space that's become available in OEP that will allow a larger number of staff to be in one space, and we just need to outfit that space so that everybody can be together.
Thank you. I'm back. All right, so I hope that answers your question, Councilmember Patton. And then going back to your other request to talk about the CRM implementation. So this is something that was funded as part of the fiscal year 23 budget process. And as you can imagine, as a city our size, we are upwards of 450,000 people here in the city of Raleigh. We don't want to track citizen requests using spreadsheets and whatnot. So this will really allow us to automate those resident requests and allow us to become more efficient. This will allow us to cover the cost of staff expansion to facilitate a fiscal year 24 implementation. And the staffing and CRM license costs are essentially these needs that we are hoping to fund with ARPA allocation funds to fund this expansion along the organization.
Cool. Thank you. Please drink some more water.
Thank you.
Going back to the HR suite, knowing that we're building the East Civic Tower, investments in the office, will they be able to plop over into the new Civic Tower when it's time?
Sure, because that space will be on the market once we're all in a consolidated campus. So basically right now we have flexible schedules because we don't have enough office space for the staff that we currently have. And what we've realized is that there are greater efficiency sometime and productivity when people are actually physically in the space. And we're spread all over. And so to be able to put staff in an environment where they can be productive, and not only that, but in a professional environment so that they can best support and serve the needs of our employees. Currently, if an employee comes in with a question right now, you may get to be in a space with somebody confidentially, or you may not. So this will just allow us to be able to centralize a location where the majority of HR folks work. This is not anything new. HR has kind of been spread out for several years, but this will allow us to be able to best serve our employees.
Thank you. And then there's the CRM. I work in customer service for my day job, and it's really important when you're getting a ton of email traffic that you're not just managing it in individual inboxes. And just to like put a exclamation point on what you said, like if a resident emails us with a need and then potentially the staff member that they're working with leaves the city, we like maintaining a record that's not housed in someone's individual inbox is really important, and being able to track those requests and see where there are like trends in service needs and stuff is really important for a city of our size. So I just wanted to lift those up. Thanks.
I have a question about Performing Arts Center. I think that might have something to do with ADA, but could you explain what is being proposed specifically?
Absolutely. So I have Evan Raleigh here, but I can get us started. So this has to do with the redesign and construction of, is it Lichton Plaza? I'm sorry, I don't know the, and that is right in front of the Performing Arts Center. So this will allow the redesign or the construction of a new driveway that would allow us to drop off guests. And again, it's going to vastly improve the Performing Arts Center's ADA accessible access to its lobby. So that's what it'll help to do. And Evan, am I missing something, please? Okay. Does that answer your question, Mayor Baldwin, or would you like me to?
Well, I mean, we have a beautiful plaza there. I'm just concerned about what the impact is. I know, I think ADA compliance is important. I've been there several times with people, once in a wheelchair and once in a boot, and another time my mom. And it was not friendly at all. And it was, quite frankly, a bad experience. But I just want to better understand what we're looking at here.
Certainly. Good afternoon again, Mayor, Council. So we are using these dollars to kind of design. So we haven't gotten into the details and specifics of what the design of this new drive would look like. But the intent is, as Sadia described, that, and as you kind of just spoke to, Mayor, we have many challenges, particularly with individuals that have accessibility challenges, elderly, that are coming to visit the venue, not being able to easily get to the front door. It's quite a hike from the street to the front door of any of the venues. And so this is a project that we're hoping to remedy that. We do know that there is an existing plaza, and so that will have to be navigated as we think about the design of the drive. But again, we haven't gotten into all the specifics of how this will actually look. I'm sure we'll have some consultants that will be able to kind of tell us what the optimal configuration will be to achieve the goal that's been laid out here.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Branch?
Definitely thank you for, I'm losing my voice too. Thank you for the presentation and everything. My question is, I know we had a plan for a radio replacement prior to this money being available. And with that being said, I know we have a need of needing more engines and ladders. So how do we figure, is there another plan to try to fund? Because I know there's a backlog, a time frame of getting engines and ladders, and I know we have a need. So is there another source, a funding source, to try to help speed up the purchase of engines and ladders, knowing from the time we make the purchase, it's an 18-month wait?
Oh, we wish 18 months. We're talking about 36 months now, 36 to 48, actually.
Right.
Lead time on the fire trucks. So what this does, as Ms. Tatar just mentioned a few minutes ago, it allows us to totally outfit the radios. We budgeted a third because we were going to phase it in. These additional funds will allow us to do all of those. And what we're doing is part of that master plan to look at fire needs in the future that is currently underway. Will help us to best determine that. As always, our fire chief reminds us almost daily of what the needs and demands of the service is right now. And so what we typically will do is if there's any opportunity or resource availability through our CIP process, that would be how we would program big purchases like a fire truck.
Okay, and I was just thinking, because I think the last couple council meetings in this past year, we purchased some engines. It's like 800,000, if I remember. And you don't always get millions that you can reallocate. So that's why I wanted to ask: is there a way, another vehicle, or another way to try to work towards that? Because now we're saying 36 months. What can we do?
Hit the lottery tomorrow, isn't it tomorrow? So would you have anything to add to that, Ms. Tatar?
I will say that, Budget and Finance works really closely with our partners in Raleigh Fire. And we have been working very closely with Chief Griffin and his financial staff. And I believe that we did identify and that we could purchase, I believe, a ladder truck. And we brought this in front of City Council a little earlier. So we've been working through the various avenues and the channels that are available to us to assure that we get those vehicles delivered. Another thing that is a priority as part of the upcoming CIP process, is to ensure that we see, I think I should stop talking. Sorry, I have another item after this. But something that Allison, Bradshaw, and myself are talking about, especially as we go into another CIP process, is to really assess what those needs are. I think the Fire Master Plan, and we actually received 3 responses to the RFP on December 21st. That'll really help assess what those citywide needs are. And then as we go into the CIP process, that'll help determine what those needs are in the future for sure.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, do we have a motion?
Move for approval of the recommended items.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that was unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next and last item under my report today is bringing to conclusion the acquisition of the DMV site on New Bern Avenue. So this is a tag team effort from Emma Sutton from Housing and Neighborhoods, Taisha Hinton. You're still using Hinton? Okay, we'll update it for the next meeting. She got married. Taisha Hinton from Community Engagement, and then Sadia Sitar from Budget and Management Services.
Thank you. Good afternoon again. Council Mayor Emma Sutton, Housing and Neighborhoods. As the manager mentioned, I'm representing a group of city staff regarding the former DMV headquarters site acquisition proposal. Here's our agenda today. I'm going to review the site history with you, provide a brief overview of terms. Sadia Sitar is going to present on budget recommendations, and Taisha Hinton will be here to talk about community engagement. So here's what the site looks like. It's 5.88 acres. There's a main building with 159 square feet and an annex with just over 41,000 square feet, 159,000 square feet, excuse me. Here is a brief timeline. In 2019, the state made a decision to relocate their DMV headquarters building on New Bern Ave to Rocky Mount. Both prior and since that decision, city and state leaders have discussed partnership and collaboration opportunities to ensure beneficial redevelopment of the site. In July 2021, the City Council authorized city staff to initiate site acquisition activities on sites adjacent to transit investments. In July 2022, the state of North Carolina authorized disposition of the DMV headquarters in their annual budget. In September 2022, the City of Raleigh provided a formal letter of interest and also submitted a high-level vision document in January 2023, which you can find in your board information. The city submitted a formal letter to purchase the property on March 30th, 2023, and disposition was approved by the North Carolina Council of State on June 6, 2023. Sorry, the sale has completed the required 90-day notice period, and the city and state have negotiated a purchase agreement, which is outlined briefly here. So in short, it is a $20 million purchase price for the total of 5.88 acres. The property is sold in as-is condition. There's an inspection period of up to 240 days. The state is to provide documents related to building and site construction within 30 days of contract execution, and closing is set to occur in spring 2024 or earlier if requested by the city. I will defer to Sadia.
Good afternoon, Sadia Sattar from Budget and Management Services. Thank you, Emila. As Allison Bradshaw alluded earlier, as part of our ARPA recommendations, we have about $20 or so million that is left to allocate, not reallocate, but allocate for funding. And it is so exciting that we are able to purchase this site through ARPA funds. The total estimated cost for purchasing some site remediation as well as site stabilization activities totals up to about $23.34 million. Of the $23.34 million, $20 million is the estimated cost to purchase the site that was just described in the slide prior to this. Another $3 million is being set aside for closing costs, site remediation, and demolition costs. This includes assessments of any remediation related to asbestos and lead paint and potential underground storage and tanks that may be underneath the site in and of itself. And then again, we are really fortunate that not only are we able to purchase the site and pay for these remediation costs, but the city will also be able to do some effective engagement with the community to decipher what the potential future site could look like, and as well as really stabilize the site in the interim to provide some fencing and camera installation around the area as well. So some interim and stabilization and activation considerations are here in this slide, as you can see. So we know that there's a lot happening around the New Bern corridor. We've got BRT construction. We broke ground on that just last year. So there's a potential here to do a lot of engagement with our community. And of course, we also have the Tarboro Road Community Center across the street there as well. There's also a potential to do work with our public project community support partners to understand further what could happen at the site as well. And again, we could also use the site for some possible staging for both the BRT as well as Tarboro projects. Also, there's potential for some temporary public art investments as well. But before I go any further, I'd like to hand it over to Taisha Hinton, who will talk a little bit more about some cross-departmental site planning related to the DMV. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you, Marshall. I'm still in a bit of a name transition myself. I just got my new Social Security card last week. So Taisha Mosley with the Office of Community Engagement. A couple of things here for that cross-departmental site planning. We've had conversations to do some environmental and facility assessment, who evaluated the conditions for us, gave us an estimated cost of remediation and demo. We've also identified site stabilization needs and like Sadia just mentioned, that interim activation opportunities, and we've also had conversations about public safety concerns. So I am here today to talk about the community engagement plan. And the main goal here, I think, is pretty clear, right? To obtain a clear understanding of the community's vision for the site, and then use that information to help us develop a list of potential site opportunities. And we'll use that information to guide what's a part of the request for information or the request for proposal. The framework for community engagement has 3 steps. I know it's a lot of words, bear with me. The first is the fact finding and research. Second is our learn and ideation phase. And then last is to prioritize and curate the priorities. And so we actually started step 1 back in October of last year in that fact finding and research, where there was a lot of information gathering, some informal outreach and engagement, and then the establishment of a process leader group. And that's basically individuals that are from the New Bern Avenue corridor and live around the area. And I think what's been fascinating about this group of individuals is that they believe we're in a unique position to really create the opportunity for our legacy residents to have the ability to thrive in place. And then they also see the opportunity for some community wealth building. In the first phase as well, we hope with your approval today to begin the advertisement and the recruitment of what we're calling a project working group, which I'll talk about in my last 2 slides. In phase 2, we want to establish that, and right here in Learn and Ideate, we want to establish that project working group. And while they're getting established, like the advertisement, the recruitment, the selection, while that stuff is happening, our office would take the lead on establishing some community office hours on site. From the public view, we know that there are still some state employees in the building, but from the public, it's just been a vacant space for a while. And so we want to make sure that we're creating some activity there. Sadia mentioned temporary art. We also looked at using our community engagement van for the on-site office hours, utilizing our community connectors who are already working on New Bern Avenue through the Public Project Community Support Fund. And then our process leaders that we talked about in step 1 have recommended that we provide additional ways for people to interact with the space. Something that was mentioned was like Saturday vendor markets or just different ways to interact with the site to get ideas from the community about what we could do. And then in phase 3, which is the prioritization phase, that's when we'll have most of our focus groups and charrettes, our more detailed meetings. And we'll come up with multiple drafts of potential site opportunities based on the community input that we get. And then we'll also get you a final draft of what the community vision is at that point. So the project working group, we believe that it's important to have multiple champions, multiple groups of champions for this project. And so they would share information with the community about site opportunities and possibilities. They would get that diverse and representative feedback, and again, help develop the vision that'll be a part of the RFI or RFP. When we talk about what that includes, it's pretty specific. Because we want to make sure that there is generational diversity, a broad set of perspectives and skills, and we really want to make sure that there's we can ensure a transparent community serving outcome. So what you see here on the screen is folks that hold strong connections to the New Bern Avenue corridor. We're asking for 2nd and 3rd generation Raleigh natives, especially those with institutional knowledge or family members who were displaced as a result of different urban renewal tied to the area. We also would like to have 2 reserved seats for community at large members, individuals with personal experience, perspective, or knowledge about the needs of Raleigh's Black or African American community. So with that, I will turn it over to Emma and we'll take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So the requested City Council actions today are to authorize instruments to purchase and close on the property, to authorize budget amendments and appropriate American Rescue Plan Act funds for site needs, and also to accept the community engagement plan. I will yield the podium to questions from my colleagues.
Okay. Questions do we have? Councilmember Branch, then Jones.
Definitely. Thank you for the information, the feedback. One of my questions is, as far as the work group and everything that's being pulled together, what are the checkpoints from the time the group, and when will they be checkpoints back to council? Will they be along the way? Is it at the end?
It would
How
definitely
does
be
that
along the
work?
way. So we would bring that list, if you all give us the approval to move forward with what's been stated, we would bring that list of project working group members back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Jones?
Thank you. If this was already said, please forgive me. The 3.34 million outside of the 20 million is allocated for the acquisition of the DMV. Where does that money come from?
Councilmember Jones, Sadia Satar from BMS. So the $20 million, as I identified earlier, is funding that has not yet been allocated at all. The $3.34 million is actually the remaining that was a part of the reallocation of ARPA. So the total available for reallocation for ARPA is $9-ish million. So we set aside 6.532 that you saw in an earlier presentation. The remaining we are able to utilize for site stabilization, activation, and for closing and site remediation purposes.
Understood. So everything with acquisition and with remediation is coming from ARPA.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Councilmember Patton?
Yeah. Hi, this one's for Taisha. I just wanted to, it's not even really a question exactly, but I just kind of wanted to put an exclamation mark on the innovative activations of the site. It gave me flashbacks to the Commerce Place engagement event where it was like activate a space that's never been activated before, and it helps people imagine what it could be like, and it had like bluegrass band. It was cool. And so I think like your mention of doing like a vendor market, I think doing those things on site that have never been done on the site helps people envision what it could be. And so I think it like kind of gives people's juices flowing. And so I think that's a great idea. And I just wanted to put an exclamation mark on that.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I just wanted to add, I think the engagement strategy and framework is good. I'm ready to support it. I will say, though, that I hope that we are ready to move on the feedback quickly. This particular site's very important. I think it'll send a very strong message if we can get the type of housing and supportive services and retail that we know we need there. And also, I think what we've seen recently is no disrespect to anyone on staff or prior councils, we study things a lot, and then when it comes time to build them, we wait, then they're too expensive, Like, we need to move on this site. And so I support the engagement strategy, and I want to echo what Councilmember Patton said about if there's anything we can do in the interim to activate it and make it a place that's just not a ditch or a building with a fence around it for the next 2-3 years. I think that's going to be really important.
Mm-hmm. I would agree, especially when we look at Moore Square. That's exactly what happened in Moore Square for a decade. So seeing something come to life, I think, will be very important. I want to thank staff for their hard work on this. I also want to mention, too, the community engagement piece. We also have Tarboro Road coming up for redevelopment. And having some type of, if you look up, these two sites complement each other, Tarboro Road and the DMV site. How do we make that part of this discussion as well? And I know Parks is well aware of this, but having some complementary uses or whatnot, I think could really add to the experience. So I would like to make a motion to approve the authorization for the budget amendments, accept the community engagement plan. I love the activation idea, and development of a project advisory group.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, thank you, that was unanimous. Thank you very much.
And one last thing, Ms. Tatar did not mention it. However, just as a gentle reminder, you have until Friday for the survey that was sent out for the $1.4 million that is still remaining in that ARPA balance so that we can get those funds obligated and to meet our deadline for this year. So just get your survey responses back to Sadia and team by Friday.
Quick question.
Yes.
So are there things like bus shelters and stuff like that that can be considered? I know it's like one-time expenditures or something along those lines, but would that be considered or not an appropriate use?
I think we're open and flexible to see how we would be able to make anything that you guys bring forward possible. So to not rule that out, I think that would be an opportunity, yes.
I just wanted to mention too, the Downtown Raleigh Alliance has been working with a group who's conducting a study on economic development and how we can revitalize and make safety, improve safety in the Fayetteville Street corridor. They're going to be coming back with a lot of recommendations, I believe, in February. And it's going to be, it's going to take funding to help make some of this happen. So that's something we might want to keep in mind, especially the safety factor. So as we're looking at priorities.
And that concludes my report.
Okay.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. All right.
I'll hit the Powerball and take care of all this stuff.
Somebody won last night.
Did they win?
Yeah, Michigan.
Oh, see, that goes to show you what I know, right? I was thinking it's tomorrow. Oh, shoot. Well, we'll have to get started and cranked up for the next one.
Okay, next we have report and recommendation of the Economic Development Innovation Committee.
No report. We have one item pending, but we will not have a meeting this month.
Okay, Growth and Natural Resources.
No report. We have 2 items pending for this month, comprehensive plan amendment for downtown transition areas and the rezoning of 0 Gorman Street.
Okay, thank you. Safe, vibrant, and healthy community. I know that Evan is here. Evan, are we ready to move forward with the some of the issues that we had been discussing related to downtown public safety? Okay, so then we will have a meeting then on at 11:30, and that will be our topic of discussion. Transportation and transit.
I have a quick question relating to that committee. Are we going to be talking, that you just mentioned that there is a Downtown Raleigh Alliance study on safety? Is that going to be part of that discussion?
It's an economic development study that will be brought forward to the full council.
But didn't you say it was on safety in the area?
It's a full study on economic development. Safety is part of it. It's very inclusive. It's an economic development study that we helped pay for, that they managed. That will be coming to the full council.
It won't be going to any committee beforehand to discuss?
No.
Okay.
So for transit, no report. We have 2 items, Newbern Avenue Corridor, Community Supportive Projects and Programs update, as well as bicycle and mobility plan update. We will be meeting on January the 25th here in the chamber at 3 o'clock.
Okay. Thank you. Next, we have report from Mayor and City Council. I'll start with Councilmember Harrington.
First of all, just want to say Happy New Year. I'm grateful to serve on this body and begin another year together. In the past few months, I know we've heard a lot of heartbreak in our community due to global conflicts. And I know today we're not hearing that, but we may hear it again. And I do believe as a body, we hold a rather unique position in hearing the hearts and minds of our residents and what's going on in our community. We represent a really diverse and amazing place. And I just want to assure folks that are out there that your voices are heard. And in that regard, I want to put forth a statement of peace and compassion. I acknowledge the impact of global conflicts on our community. I believe all of Raleigh City Council mourns the tragic loss of life and related humanitarian crises around the world. I also believe we envision a city where all are safe and welcome. I condemn hate speech, including but not limited to anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and anti-Palestinian sentiments. And finally, I recognize the urgency of the Israel-Hamas conflict, and I know our hearts go out to all those who have suffered and lost so much. I call for the protection of innocent civilian lives, support of humanitarian relief, and respect of international law in the region. I call for the return of hostages and exchange of detainees. I call for peace and compassion here in Raleigh and abroad. Thank you.
Councilmember Fort.
No report.
Councilmember Jones.
Great. Thank you so much. I have a few things. First off, a shout out to my daughter, Annalise Jones, who is celebrating her 10th birthday today. Your dad and I are so proud of you, and I can't believe you're in double digits already. It is also Michael Moore and Kim Nimmer's birthday, and I also wish them the happiest day. So happy birthday. And you're lucky. I was going to sing, but I promise I won't sing. Maybe later I'll sing for you. Next, my neighbor had a medical emergency on Christmas Eve morning and had to be transported to the hospital for emergency surgery. He had asked if I could connect him to the firefighters who helped save his life last night, and last night we were able to bring dinner to the crew who responded to him in his time of need. Thank you to the entire fire department for what you do to protect residents, but a huge shout out to Station 17 for saving my neighbor's life. I cannot thank you enough. The next thing is that my District E community meeting will be on January 10th from 7 to 9 p.m. And I'm waiting on confirmation, but I really hope to have it at the Restore, the Habitat for Humanity Restore on Glenwood Avenue, but I will confirm through social media, so keep your eyes peeled. The next thing I have says, I am a little confused with our missing middle discussion. We were set to continue conversations on December 5th, but our discussion surrounding the city manager's performance evaluation took the lion's share of the time, and I was under the impression that this would be moved to the January 2nd meeting, but I have just learned today that we are not going into closed session, and I just want to confirm, city manager, is that true, and when did that continued conversation get scheduled for? I happen to represent a district that is very, very interested in learning what council feels about missing middle, and I can't keep pushing back their concerns.
So, and City Attorney Karen McDonald can echo or add to the sentiments, but it was my understanding that the item would be pushed to January 16th. There was never a discussion that was communicated or articulated to me that it would be on this agenda. So I don't know, when you said it a few minutes ago, I was a little bit surprised because it was never on the tentative agenda schedule prior to the 16th. At the close of that meeting, I think the attorney's office had spoken with former attorney to see availability, and I thought the date was the 16th. I was not aware, so maybe there's a conversation that took place outside of me, but I never
Maybe so,
assumed
and
that-
maybe because I didn't hear, it happened towards the end of that meeting last time, and we had also skipped over our resolution discussion, so I think it all got flustered, and I just needed to know the date. So if it's going to be January 16th, that's great. Yes.
And I think the city attorney was getting ready to speak, so.
That's what I have, but I will also circle back with former city attorney Robin Tatum to make sure that we're still on for the 16th.
Okay, so residents in District E, that conversation will happen on January 16th. The next thing I have is Chef Alex Rishi is in the final stages of opening up his new restaurant called Prospects. It is a guest-driven menu that elevates nostalgic dishes, like my new favorite, which is called a Talk with Pritchard, which has all the components of pastrami Reuben with a twist. Excellent service and a layout that makes you feel like you're dining directly in the kitchen makes this experience one that you won't soon forget. It's located on Northwest Street in Jane's District in the former Rainbow Luncheonette space. So if you have a chance, go check it out. And then lastly, there are currently 132 residents signed up to speak at next week's public comment section. Over the last few months, we've seen a significant increase in the amount of people who want to show council what their values are. We added an additional meeting every month so that we could dedicate time to hear every person who wanted to speak, and we guaranteed 3 minutes for anyone who signed up. That promise has been compromised in the past due to the number of signups, but we don't normally see that until the day before the meeting. I will always stand up for resident voices to be heard in full. And knowing that this number is sure to increase before January 9th, I would like to make a motion that we secure the 3-minute time for everyone who signs up, whether that is 10 or 200 people. So I make that motion. Seconded by Councilor Black.
All in favor? Motion fails. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. When is our council retreat scheduled for?
26,
It's the end of the month.
January 26th and 27th.
So we will not have an opportunity to discuss that until the end of the month.
Until the retreat.
We need to have a holistic discussion about, there is a disconnect between this new meeting we added and the 3 minutes, and then our rules that say the chair can still change time. And we need to have a discussion about what is the intent of this meeting. How can we provide predictability to the public? And I will just say that if the intent of the new meeting is just public comment, I will sit here as long as I have to sit here. I will. I'm worried for folks that have other business that want to address the city and how long they're going to be sitting here, but I don't mind. I'll bring snacks, that's fine. But we do need to have a discussion at this retreat about how we can provide predictability, how folks can come prepared to speak and not have this yo-yo of how much time they have and what the intent is. And so I wanted to say that.
Councilmember Ford.
While we're talking about it, I know, some people may not want to hear this, but we do a lot of public comment more so than most of our other municipalities. And so it may be helpful, to show how much public comment other, municipalities are doing so folks can see what the comparison is. I mean, because we get pinged on social media and all this stuff. I mean, but we'll talk about it at retreat. But I do think having some type of comparison of what other municipalities are doing versus what we're doing would be helpful so the public can see that they probably have more access to us than some of our other counterparts and colleagues. So.
That is an agenda item for the retreat scheduled, and you may recall that former attorney Robin Tatum brought back some benchmark data last year to kind of compare us to peer cities to kind of see what was being done across the board, as well as some additional information from the UNC School of Government. So all of that will be part of the conversation that we have at the end of the month.
And that's all. Thank you.
Definitely, thank you. Thank you, City Manager, for that information, because I think it is helpful to have that historic data as we move forward and as we talk about public engagement and the time frame and matters that come before us that we can have an impact on. I think all of us are completely accessible as we move out from grocery stores to anywhere. That's one good thing about local government. The things I wanted to mention is that as we talk about thank you, Councilor Harrison, for your comments. But as we talk about peace and everything that's coming up, oftentimes a gentleman is quoted when people are making their points of view about peace. And before our next council meeting, we will take the time to recognize Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I always say sometimes I had the pleasure not to meet him, never met him, but I know people and have had conversation with people who did interact with him. And with that history and that feedback, I just ask that we all take the time to understand the entire man and the entire message that he was talking about as far as peace and coming together, and that we have to find a way, even when we disagree, to be a way to love on each other and appreciate each other. So please, I know it's a holiday here at the city on the 15th of which we celebrate MLK Day, and we come back here on the 16th, so another holiday right before council meeting. But I look forward to the work there, and just remember, everyone, reach out, embrace, love, and that we may not always agree, but we have to find a way to continue to move the city forward together. That's all I have. One more thing, January 20th, I will have a District C meeting, again at 1214 East Lenore Street at 10 a.m. So look forward to those in the district coming out. Thank you.
Councilmember Black.
Happy Gregorian New Year, everyone. I hope you had a very restful, peaceful end to your year, because we all deserve it. Couple things today. The first thing, next Saturday, I'm starting my Around the Districts with Councilmember Black. So weather permitting, we're going to be doing a walk around Shelley Lake, because I like nature, and we should get some fresh air and talk about stuff. So that's going to be from 1 to 2:30. We're going to be meeting outside of Serturma Arts Center at 12:45, and we'll take off like shortly after that. I'm going to post about it. There'll be a sign-up sheet, so we won't miss you if you come late. But that'll be not this coming Saturday, but next Saturday on the 13th. One other thing that I have been really concerned about since having my public meeting last month, we had a report from the police. And one of the things they talked about was the uptick in crimes that we have been seeing, and it's specifically with youths. And as the youngest person on this council, I do feel like such a compulsory due diligence to want to address that concern holistically. I've talked to you about it before, Marshall, but I'm really interested in having a work session where we can field some like talking points or ideas of how we can have different points of intervention with the youth that are in this city and see what's going on. I know we have a lot of nonprofit, community-led organizations that also have a deep interest in this as well. But really, I just want to get a holistic understanding of what's going on and how the city can start to address it. I also want to raise up the idea of the Office for the Youth again, or some sort of teen board, not a teen board, a young people's board, youth commission, youth board for people between the ages of 18 to 25 so that we can really start to have these conversations, because I'm really worried that this part of the demographic of our city, which really makes up a big framework, is not being well represented. So those are my three things that I'm really interested in. I would love to have those two things maybe come back in a manager's report, but I really would like a work session talking about like teens, youth, and like crime and intervention. The other thing that we've been having a lot of comments today about, peace. We have upcoming MLK Day. I know the day after is also Day of Racial Healing. So there's a lot of really deep thoughts that are happening this month and reflections that are taking place. I want to make sure that City Council remains a space where all people from the community can come and feel welcome to voice their concerns as it relates to really what's under our purview, but also things that are in other spaces. And I don't know if we've really been allowed or been able to do that. I shared with everybody earlier today a letter signed by NC elected leaders to the Biden administration and the NC congressional delegation asking for a permanent ceasefire in Palestine and Israel. It's a sign-on letter that was co-authored by Jewish Voice for Peace as well as Muslim For. I would love to read part of it, but I shared it with everyone here. I know we have several people on this body that have already signed on. I would love for more people to sign on if, the conversations of other things can't get to where they need to go. I think the community is just really wanting to know where people stand on certain things. So I'm going to read part of it. We write to you as elected officials from all levels of government in North Carolina. We believe all human life is precious, and the targeting of civilians during a military conflict is a violation of international humanitarian law. We thank you for your work thus far to bring a humanitarian pause. It is our sincere hope that the negotiations can continue to extend to a solution for peace. Therefore, we call on the Biden administration and the North Carolina congressional delegation to publicly call for a permanent ceasefire in Palestine and Israel. It goes on to talk about a number of things, specifically supporting the ceasefire now resolution that's in the U.S. House of Representatives, as well as urging Biden to continue to work for the release of all hostages held by Hamas and the Palestinians detained in the Israeli government. And it also urges the U.S. Department of State and Homeland Security to demonstrate compassion by extending temporary protected status to those deferred and forced departure. So that's in your inbox. Sign it, don't sign it. All the way around, peace and blessings for this year. That's all.
Councilmember Patton.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. I wanted to announce my community meeting on January 11th from 6 to 8 at the Salty Turtle on Falls of the Neuse. Also wanted to provide lots of celebrations. First, I wanted to thank Raleigh Transportation Department. We know there was a woman recently who fell at a bus stop that didn't have a bench, and your team leapt into action. There's a bench there now, and we're really glad for that swift replacement. If you can recirculate to me information, I know you've sent it our way before, about where there are not benches, how it's determined, and how many more benches we would need to put one at every stop in the city. I would love that information, but thank you for your swift action there and response to our residents. I also wanted to highlight some good work coming out of the consent agenda today. This is a unique one. We hadn't had it before, but there was a contract for tire retreading services, which demonstrate a real commitment from our city to sustainability. There was a neat factoid that I'll lift up for the viewing audience, that it takes 7 gallons of petroleum to retread a tire versus 22 gallons of petroleum to create a new tire. So this contract for retreading all the tires in our vehicle fleet is a real testament to our commitment to sustainability. So great job, staff. That's awesome to see. And then a little love for our residents. We've got several folks in my district who've adopted a park or a trail. So we've got adoptees of the Neuse River Trail, Gus Vandermeeren, Emily Dunnigan and Caroline Phelan. Also, Durant Nature Preserve was adopted by David White, and Horseshoe Farms Nature Preserve was adopted by Jeff Noren. So those were awesome celebrations. And then I'll just close by thanking Councilmember Harrison for your words and statement. And if you'll have me, I'll sign on to your statement as well.
Council, Mayor Pro Tem.
No report.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any report either, just we have a lot of work we're going to have to be doing in the upcoming months. This will get underway this month, and I just want to say thank you to everybody, especially our staff, for the hard work that they put into all of this and all you do to make our city special. And I just want to wish everybody a Happy New Year, and be ready to charge on. Thank you. Next, we have appointments.
Good afternoon. First, we have Board of Adjustment, 1 alternate vacancy, city appointee. Kay Crowder received 6 votes, so would be appointed. Fair Housing Hearing Board, 1 regular vacancy. Councilmember Patton nominated Christopher West, and Councilmember Fort nominated Wanda Hunter, so both of those names will be appearing on your next ballot. Historic Cemeteries Advisory Board, Councilmember Patton nominated Keith Pacella, so that will appear on your next ballot. Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board, 1 regular vacancy. Kate Dixon received 8 votes, so would be appointed. Raleigh Transit Authority, no nominees.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I did have a late nominee for that
Sure.
one, if I can add that name. His name is Byron, Byron Leak, Leak, and he is from Healing Transitions.
Sure, so he will appear on the next ballot.
And I sent him the link, so he will apply between now and then, so you'll have his application.
So down to nominations, Appearance Commission, 1 regular vacancy. As you'll recall, during the November 7th meeting, you guys requested to hold the item until some additional information could be gathered from Appearance Commission members on meeting dates and times. That happened. The memo was dispersed to council in December, and so the item has been placed back on the agenda to reconvene the process. The first vacancy on here, as a reminder, is due to the term expiration of a regular member, Corey Bates, who is not eligible for reappointment due to length of service. Past practice, this is where we left off last time, would be to elevate the longest serving alternate. In this case, there's 3 that were appointed on the same date, so it's up to council what you guys would like to do.
I would move to appoint Matthew Griffith, given his attendance record.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that will create a new alternate vacancy that'll be coming back. Yeah, in addition to the next one, same thing, report was received. That vacancy was due to the resignation of an alternate or regular member and elevation of an alternate. I think I'm gibbering at this point. So 2 alternate vacancies will be in your next ballot.
Can I nominate Kate Charland for
Sure.
one of them?
Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, 1 regular vacancy. The term of Tammy Stern is expiring, and she wishes to be considered for reappointment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I couldn't, Councilmember Black. Okay.
Board of Adjustment, 1 regular vacancy, city appointee. Term of regular city member Kathy Rudersell is expiring, and she wishes to be considered for reappointment.
Move to reappoint.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay.
Environmental Advisory Board, 1 regular vacancy. A resignation has been received from Bob Gilbert. Therefore, you have 1 vacancy for consideration.
I'd like to nominate Sana Siddiqui for that position.
Can you spell that, please?
Yeah, Sana is Sana, and then last name is Siddiqui, Siddiqui.
And I would like to nominate Kaylin Peterson.
Okay. Those will be coming back. Raleigh Convention and Performing Arts Centers Authority, 1 regular vacancy. The term of Leon Cox is expiring, and he wishes to be considered for reappointment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that was unanimous.
Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority, 1 regular vacancy. There was some information included with the agenda materials regarding the purpose of the authority and how the city makes appointments. The term of city appointee Dickie Thompson is expiring, and he does not wish to be considered for reappointment. State law does provide guidance that appointments should be made at the first meeting in January. And there was a memo dispersed to council about that.
Sorry. I would like to nominate Jerry McCrane.
I'd like to nominate Shelley Winters.
I'm going to second Jerry.
You said McCrane?
Yes.
How do you spell that?
MC, little c, and then big C, R-A-I-N.
Okay, it's just like it sounds. Okay, so Harrison and Baldwin co-nominate, and then Shelley Winters was Jones and Black. Okay.
I had a question. I know it says state law provides guidance that we should make nomination or should make the appointment. Is it legal and possible to just take these two and roll them to the ballot like we do with all the other commissions?
I think
that's a question for the city attorney.
And unfortunately, I need to research that.
so. In the past, when looking into this, if an appointment happened on a different day, it was kind of remedied. You know, you can backtrack retroactively, you know, have an effective date, which I think would meet the.
We're getting nods from the city attorney,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I would be fine with that too. That's
Yeah.
fine.
So I can send this on a ballot and then announce that at the next meeting.
Okay.
With an effective date of this meeting.
Right.
Got it.
Okay, thank you.
And then lastly, Stormwater Management Advisory Commission, 2 regular vacancies. Term of Terrell Moore is expiring. He does not wish to be considered for reappointment, so he will continue to serve until replaced. And then recently appointed member James House has resigned due to some scheduling conflicts. Therefore, there are 2 vacancies for consideration. Neither of these individuals filled a slot that is not otherwise filled by an existing other member. And that is it.
Can I do a real quick update? I had a conversation with someone and then talked to Commissioner Thomas about the person for the Board of Adjustment, the county position. So I think they're going to have somebody coming forward shortly. So I know we were going to send the note over to them, but I think we've identified somebody over the holiday to take that spot.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we have the report and recommendation of the city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I just calculated it. I have completed my 65th working day with the city of Raleigh. And again, want to express my sincere appreciation to the council for this appointment. It has certainly been a very exciting time being here. We are working to make some staffing changes and updates, and I hope to share those with the council very soon. Consistent with the comments of the council at the table earlier, my office is working to update the information that the previous city attorney, Robin Tatum, shared with you about public comment, and we'll be prepared at your retreat to have discussion about that.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have the report and recommendation of the city clerk.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Lou Bonapane, City Clerk. You received in your agenda materials various minutes from recent meetings.
Move for
submitted your
approval.
consideration.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. Okay. We do not have a closed session today, so I am going to recess to the evening session. We'll be back here at 7 p.m. For our public hearings. Thank you very much.